Alright, I think we're live again. I'm going to do all the usual checks to make sure the bits are flowing, but I just reassembled the entire streaming rig on the opposite side of the room, making some improvements along the way. Looks like we are live on the YouTube sphere. Is it a sphere or some kind of dodecahedron or something? And on the Twitchiverse. Also these days, as I wanted to mention, been kind of getting into the possibilities for decentralizing the internet a little bit, and so I've been also setting up a live stream from my own server here, which is also running a PeerTube server. So we'll take a little bit of a look at that too. Anyway, welcome back to the shop, to the other side of the shop. Slightly different view here. Yeah, and so what's new? I think I've got an overhead view which might show that a little bit more. So that's the Tuco Flyer camera, the one that loaded first. The other two cameras are video over IP of various sorts, so they're a little bit laggy. But we've got this nice fish angle camera here, which is the laggiest, but also pretty fun. Oh, cool. Yeah, as James mentions, we're live on that live.diode.zone URL. I guess I should update the Gitterbot to also put that out. I've got the Gitterbot set to only use one URL for some reason, but it's the same bot that's sending out messages to the other social media platforms. And I think the other platforms list the diode zone URL there too. So yeah, all the picture-in-picture is actually obscuring the main view a little bit. Let's tone this down slightly. Yeah, and Tuco Flyer needs a little bit of debugging, but it is operational right now. So there's the main overhead view. I can wave. I'm waving right now. It's a little laggy, but yes. Yeah, live.diode.zone. Oh, nice. I'm glad it's working for some folks. Yeah, please check it out if you're able and interested, and let me know if you have problems or if it works all right. I'm sending the same exact H.264 stream to Twitch and live.diode.zone, so it should look basically the same as Twitch. But you know, it's running maybe a simpler player. I don't know what Twitch's player looks like these days, but Diode Zone is running. Oh, I forget what it's called. It's an open source video player. I think it has a really simple name, like JS Video or something. Well, we can take a look at that, but it's an open source player that happens to have its own implementation of HLS, or Apple's HTTP live streaming protocol. So it supports HLS on many platforms. But yeah, a little bit of reorganization. So I'm coming from you up here in the northeast corner. The heater on the other side of the room where I'm pointing now, that's close to where I was streaming from before, so especially if you tuned into any of the streams that happened in the winter, I was often kind of like enjoying the warmth next to the heater and wearing warm socks, and that was nice. There were some downsides to that side of the room. It's really sunny, which is really nice, but unfortunately having a bunch of like equipment and storage and stuff right up against that wall made it hard to use the windows and open the curtains that much, so it's nice to have the equipment against the other wall for that reason. I think the real instigating factor for this move, although there were several reasons and several things that I hoped to fix, I think the instigating thing was that I was just really tired of running as much electricity as this whole setup takes over a long wire to plug it into this electrical outlet that I then find out, because of this electricity monitoring I've been doing, that outlet doesn't even have a really great connection. So like that outlet seems to have the highest resistance of any of the outlets, so like its voltage changes the most when I increase the load. So it's like, well, that's all right, but I think we can do better. And this space, despite being really big and in this industrial building that I'm sure has plenty of electricity, I don't actually have that much in the way of outlets and circuits in my specific unit here. But the ones I do have are over here on this wall where I've got the desk now. So you can also see these two equipment racks. Can I actually point on here? I'm realizing that would be useful. I can make it bigger. I can embiggen the screen. I could use a tiny version of myself to point. So if I point right there, That's the large rack that you're seeing me stream from right now. So it's the usual rack that I've had in my shop for a while. I haven't done a ton of reorganization inside that rack, even though it really needs it. I did a lot more than I was planning on, because inevitably anytime I change much about the setup, there's something that goes wrong with the video pipeline. And so this time, like, I was completely changing how the microscope video recordings work, because some HDMI cable got long enough that the previous setup no longer worked. But but I've got a solution for the winter thing, James, because I'm next to the exhaust end of the rack, which means that there's slightly higher ambient noise maybe. Although I'm using these 120mm fans in the rack now that are really quiet, so I don't know if you can really hear it over the pretty high levels of ambient noise in this place anyway. I was just trying to tune the, I've got like an equalizer on the microphone that you're hearing now, and I was just trying to tune that. And there's this giant noise peak around 70 hertz that I think is just coming from factory equipment nearby. I could show you what it sounds like with that filter turned off. So right now, this is my attempt at just doing a really, really quick cleanup on the audio, kind of similar to what I had before. But let's turn off the filter. So you can, I mean, it might depend on whether you're listening to this on headphones or on speakers that have like a giant subwoofer attached, but on these headphones at least, it sounds like there's this kind of rumbling giant machine nearby. It's not quite as bad now as it was maybe 15 minutes ago. It does seem to change as people turn equipment on and off, but it's like more than I wanted, so this is the filter I've been using. It's a compromise between like cutting the external noise out and making my voice a little bit tinny, but it's fine. Let me know what you think. There might also be fancier denoising plugins and stuff I can use. It just needs to be something that runs real time. I do fancier denoising, usually using, even just the denoiser built into Adobe Premiere seems to be alright, so that's what I've been using for edited videos, but yeah. So, okay, so yeah, that's the video rack. We could go into it in maybe a little more detail with one of the other cameras, but it has several machines. It's got these two rack-mounted Windows machines that are kind of the heavy lifters doing all the video work. There's basically one for streaming and one for editing. So there's this machine that I've been calling Color Burst that does all the robot stuff and all the streaming. So it's usually running OBS and encoding a couple of, well, usually just one or two H.264 streams. But I try to do the encoding on this machine on the GPU just to free up the CPU for other stuff. And then I do a CPU transcode on a GPU transcode on a different machine. I guess I could get maybe slightly higher quality on the low bitrate streams if I was doing CPU transcoding, but I don't think that machine was quite fast enough to do CPU transcodes, and the GPU transcodes work pretty well. And yeah, so that's the usual rack. And then this little one is new. You were maybe seeing, I'm so bad at directions. You're maybe seeing it kind of open and all over the place, kind of in the middle of the room, which used to be right around here. That is the home of Diode Zone and all the network infrastructure that it's based on. Hey, Train. Hey, Ellie. Yeah, we can keep experimenting with the voice filtering, or even just turn it off. I mean, I figured the rumbling as it is would be kind of too much for folks with subwoofers or headphones, but I can also try just one of these filters, because I had a couple of filters here. There's like, here's a compromise. So it's only the really low frequency cut, and it takes out some of the voice tinniness maybe. And then there's the full rumble. Let's try the compromise. Anyway, hi, nice to see everyone in chat. Hello, Fred. I'm also trying to keep an eye on the YouTube and the Twitch chat. I've just got that monitor a little bit further away than usual. So yeah, a little rack. There's also just a little bit more kind of separation in the space, which could be good for some things and bad for other things. It might make it a little bit more interesting flying around Tuco Flyer, the mobile camera at the moment. The other thing I've got, which might be kind of cool, is I've got a camera on the other desk connected to the streaming machine. So I can do more kind of computery stuff on live stream without it being such a headache. Because I think in the past, some folks were interested in maybe experimenting in like video editing streams, and also sometimes I do programming streams from this desk, which is not the most well set up for that. But I have another desk which is mostly kind of computer-y stuff, and when I was rerunning the cabling, I ran a USB cable over there so that I could put a little webcam up there for streaming. How does that work then? Can I demonstrate that? Yeah, I don't really have that camera aimed very well right now, but hello. That would be more useful if I was standing up at that desk and working on some computer stuff. Oh, Michael says there's a third rack in the upper left corner. That's the heater. That is not mine. That belongs to the building. But it is kind of a third rack. It's just not electrical. It's gas powered and gets a little warmer than the other racks tend to. Yeah, well, I guess I've also got this this graphy stuff up, which we could talk about. Still not quite used to the new, well, new. It's not that new at this point, but one of the last couple of OBS updates. OBS is the streaming software I use. It moved the visibility toggle from the left side of the box to the right side, which I don't know. It's like weird that they would make a UI change, which is both kind of arbitrary, like it doesn't really make it more consistent as far as I can tell. It just seems to kind of trip up people who are used to clicking on the box in the one particular place. But Alex says it's like it's flipped. Yeah, I pretty much did just like mirror the shop from one side to the other. So yeah, there's also this thing in the, where is it? That one, which is kind of like a rack, but that's a freezer. It's like a storage rack for food, whereas this is the storage rack for video, right? Actually, all the racks have a lot of storage. This one's the storage for external video on Diode Zone, whereas this is more storage for my work in progress video that I'm using for editing. Oh, good question from Jenny. What's the source of that web latency metrics? That is a plugin that's part of Telegraph, which is the data collector thing that's kind of not part of InfluxDB, but like a popular add-on by the same folks. So I'm using Telegraph, and then Telegraph has an HTTP, like an HTTP request timing plugin. So that's actually doing an HTTP head, an HTTPS head. Well, I think it does HTTP and HTTPS, but and then that's running on a separate Raspberry Pi. I initially ran those on the same server that I'm running a bunch of other stuff here on, but the latency was too variable. So I have this Raspberry Pi that's just doing ping measurements pretty much, just so that the latencies are not really impacted by stuff that's in the shop network. And that was just a way to kind of keep tabs on the network, and if something is going wrong, to maybe know about it. Yeah, so here's the more usual computer display. It also, I don't know if it's just me, but it seems more echoey than usual. That could just be because I'm not used to wearing the headphones. Usually I'm just hanging out in the shop with all of you and not doing quite so much meta. But yeah, the web latency thing here. This is just pinging a handful of websites. So these items that are just single words are specific URLs on the local server here for Diode Zone. And then these external : something or other are other sites that I thought would be interesting to monitor. So yeah, Dropbox, Google, Yahoo, YouTube, just because they're like web services that might be representative. I wanted something in Europe, so I picked kind of randomly this German ISP 1&1. And yeah, so I just, every couple minutes or something, I forget how frequently, maybe it's more frequent, maybe it's like every 30 seconds, I'm doing like just an HTTP head on one URL, which should be pretty simple, but yeah, what's up with YouTube, right? I don't know why YouTube is so slow. I don't know whether they like blacklisted my IP or something, or whether they're just always this slow, but yeah, it seems like they have a daily cycle where every morning in my time zone it gets a little bit faster. It's pretty weird, right? Can we isolate that? I don't know why the axes don't rescale. Whoops. Let's see what that looks like in linear. That was also log, by the way. In linear, it looks like this. You can see it varying. I mean, that's a lot. That's like 0.2 seconds. Pretty consistent pattern. Different times of the day, though. I mean, you think that's something that's an internal process at Google, or you think it's related to web traffic, right? I don't really see that on the other sites. Like, let's look at Dropbox. It's a little jittery. It's got a bit of a daily cycle. Oh, it's had more of a daily cycle recently, actually. That's interesting. Not much there. These big changes are when I was changing, those aren't like external things, those are when I was changing aspects of how this test was performed. Because I think this was on the previous machine. I forget what these intermediate values would have been. And then this is on the Raspberry Pi that it's running on now. And the difference here is actually, I think because the Raspberry Pi is just slower at the SSL handshake than the other machine is. But as long as it's consistent, I'm not that fussed. Yeah, so I don't know why YouTube is that much more variable than everyone else. And especially after I moved this to a different server, and after this server stopped doing like video imports, it's been pretty stable. Yeah, the shop is pretty much mirrored. Let's go back to that. I like how we get this black screen for a sec while the IP cameras load. And then apparently the IP cams are pretty taxing on the CPU for OBS, so OBS kind of lags behind for a second. But yeah, we've got this. Oh, where's my mouse? I also got that Axis cam with the fisheye lens set up over here. Let's turn that back on. This one takes a sec to connect. There we go. Yeah, I thought this was kind of fun, right? So these are the monitors that I stream from. They're gonna look huge, and there's a big lag there. And then you can see kind of most of that area behind. Constantly wiping ESX. Oh yeah, that's... I managed to mostly stay away from working on ESX, so... But my sympathies. Oh yeah, James points out that if there's a weekend versus weekday difference, then it's probably user behavior versus infrastructure. That's a good question. Let's see if we can see that. Oh. So weekends, weekdays. I don't see an obvious weekend, weekday difference here. Maybe there is one though. I don't know, maybe it's like some kind of CDN backup thing that they do. Oh yeah, this is a donated camera from, this isn't from the video, or no, is it? This was a different package. I think this was sent in by Eric as a separate package. It's an Axis, I forget the model number, but it's a fisheye Axis cam that's designed to be like outdoor. You know what? I can show you on the DSLR because guess what? The DSLR works. Knock on wood, right? Do I have any wood? That is the closest wood, which is maybe a little too far. But yeah, the DSLR works. Yeah, that's the fish angle lens there. Yeah, the mica moves around in the shop feature. Yeah, it's been fun. Yeah, it's surprisingly a lot of work to move all the infrastructure, but I don't know that it's really any cleaner at the moment, but I don't know. I think it is actually less messy already, but the potential for less mess is, I think, even greater. So yeah, I'm happy with that. And most importantly, the camera has audio input, so I don't know if this is most important, but when I'm editing, this is pretty important. And then you can see the viewfinder, which is pretty important. It's like I need this camera to be able to show you itself, to show you what all this looks like. Because yeah, one thing I'd been frustrated about before is that I couldn't really move the DSLR that easily because it has this huge complicated umbilical situation. So I separated the umbilical into separate power and data feeds so I can move the power if I need to. I didn't want the power to have to be super long. And I gave it a nice long data umbilical that has SDI and audio. So SDI for the viewfinder and then separate audio for the microphone input. And that's been nice. But yeah, the fish angle works, the DSLR works. Fish angle takes a while to load, but it's right up there. And yeah. So the desk is a little messy. I guess I just wanted to do a couple things on the stream. I still obviously have a lot of reorganization and tidying to do before I feel like this is really at 100%. But I couldn't quite get this together enough to stream at all last week, so I wanted to at least stream something today. So that's what we got, and I thought I would talk a bit about the PeerTube setup. I've already been mentioning it a bit, but I thought I might actually like more formally introduce what I'm trying to do there and point you to the new About page. So PeerTube, kind of decentralized internet stuff going on there. Tuco Flyer works in so far as it worked before. It works exactly as much as it worked before, which is to say, okay, that's the microphone. This is Tuco Flyer. But we left this with some bugs that have not been resolved, so we still basically have those same bugs on the plate. So we can move the camera around. There's the kind of different, yeah, this is the side of the room you don't see as much on the overhead. So yeah, there's more sun over there now because we can open the windows a bit more, and been experimenting with some plant stuff. Yeah, and now this side of the shop is more like storage and project and organization space and space for chairs, but not electricity. So like there are no outlets on that side of the shop, and it's really annoying to run extension cords all the way over there. So no electricity on that side of the shop. And then there's the heater and the cat toilet, which is, I'm sure, the best part for everyone. Some more storage. I am going to take a look at that that WrestleFest machine. I want to actually make a game for that machine. I don't know whether that involves like a JAMA board or firmware or what, but I have a friend here who has a game that I think would be a good fit for an arcade cabinet, and so it might be nice to investigate that and try to put something cool in there. But yeah, and then here I am. A little more desk space. I'm still using these cheap plastic tables. I might actually get a more solid table for this setup soon. That might be a thing that I do, because using this microscope on the plastic table is a pain. It's just like really wobbly. I kind of compromise sometimes by putting a wooden board down and then putting the microscope on top, but I should get a real table, and I think I could carry one home from IKEA or something. And yeah. And then there's the video rack. Yeah, I had a kind of terrible KVM situation where I was sharing these two monitors between a Windows workstation and a Mac workstation, but I've been gradually doing less kind of video work on the Mac and more just using it for sort of administrative stuff. So I decided to actually stick the monitor on the rack directly and just connect that to the Mac, which also worked around a problem I was having with the DisplayPort and the Mac. And I feel like anytime I reorganize stuff, I am kind of rolling the dice on which video and audio peripherals won't be compatible with each other. What do you mean I haven't got a real chair yet? I don't even understand. I like these chairs. Yeah, no, I mean, I've had other chairs. I don't really want something else that, like, I don't like those office chairs that roll and move because they also squeak, which is not good when I'm trying to record audio. Like, I like chairs that are really quiet, and this chair is really quiet. So I don't know what other kind of chair I would have here, honestly. Alright, the desk is still a little messy. Yeah, let's go into this stuff in just a bit. Let's enter the physical world after I go through the PeerTube stuff, maybe. So yeah, PeerTube. What is it? It's, as the name might imply, it's a thing that's kind of like YouTube, but with peers, like your friends or people that you do similar kinds of work with or something. I don't know. In this case, peers happen to be other internet IPs that you can get video data from. So, you know, that's maybe not like the most profound part of PeerTube, I think. I think it's just like it's a viable piece of open source software that you can use to create a video sharing community. I think that's what is interesting to me about it. The peer part of the name is really just, it's built around WebTorrent as an underlying protocol. So in addition to downloading video directly over HTTP from a server, you can get video fragments from other people, you know, other seeder servers or other like backup servers, or just other individuals who are watching the same video directly from their browser using WebTorrent. But that's just like a technical detail. It's like a way of sharing the bandwidth. It's a way of making sure that these this kind of network of decentralized servers can't easily get as overwhelmed by individual popular videos. So it's an interesting implementation detail, and it's like an interesting rallying point for the implementation nerds to get around, I think. But to me, what I think is cool about PeerTube is it's like a starter kit for creating your own video community. It's like the technical starter kit. It's not all the pieces, it's some of the pieces. It's not really any of the social pieces, but it lets you create a framework for maybe the social pieces. So, Ellie says it's maybe a peer-to-peer distributed content delivery network. I don't know if I'd go that far. I mean, it's more like a website with some peer-to-peer features. I wouldn't call it a content delivery network just yet. Maybe in the future, once there are maybe better stories for having servers automatically mirror content off of other servers. But right now, it's basically just a video sharing site that you can run yourself with some aspirations toward larger internet interoperability goals. But I mean, I think even in its current form as a video sharing site you can run yourself, I think that's actually pretty cool. And I've been hoping that maybe I can use that to create something which is maybe just a community for for sharing creative videos. I don't want to limit it to any particular interest area. Like, I like electronics, I like cats, but I think there are a lot of other videos that I'd like to see, have a good space to hang out aside from YouTube, or even instead of YouTube in some cases. So I'm interested in providing space for that, especially if it can be specifically a space that's like more inclusive and more friendly and like less just like a nerd contest and more like a creative space. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this thing that I've been calling Diode Zone. And it's online now. In fact, if I opened a web browser instead of a terminal, I could show you. I'm not quite used to how this keyboard cable is not long enough. I'll have to get an extension for that. Yeah, so this is what it looks like so far. When you visit, you'll just see the most recent videos that have exited the transcoder queue right now. And right now, it's just going through my archives of live streams, so you'll be seeing a lot of that. But it has some other views, like recent versions of PeerTube now have this kind of per category overview, which is occasionally useful. So far, this is all my stuff, but I'm looking forward to inviting other people to upload original content here. I'm also open to the idea of having this connect with other PeerTube servers and list content from other PeerTube servers, which is usually how PeerTube works. Like most PeerTube servers follow other PeerTube servers and list content that isn't just locally hosted, which I think is a great idea. I just want to make sure that when I do that, that it doesn't make it harder to have Diode Zone just be a nice space for the kinds of things that I want it to be for. And right now, PeerTube itself is kind of light on moderation tools. So I think I'm most interested in just like really selectively following perhaps instances that have really similar goals to Diode Zone right now and not just following everyone. But that said, you can also find PeerTube's instances that do just follow everyone, and those can be nice hubs for just discovering and searching things. Robert says, the player I have on live.diode.zone doesn't allow for changing the resolution. No, as far as I know, there are no open source HLS players that do like resolution switching. If you know of any, let me know, because I'd like to implement that feature. But as far as I know, the players don't support that yet. Oh yeah, Michael says they haven't figured out how PeerTube does NAT punching, though it seems to work. Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, NAT is... well, network address translation. It's typical for home networks and most business networks, and even a lot of like school networks, and like anything where you have a lot of computers within one organization. You'll typically have a single point at which all of those computers have to share one IP address from the outside network's point of view. So that's NAT. And when that happens, you can't necessarily share content directly from your computer because there's no direct network path to that computer. So there are some ways around that. NAT hole punching is a way where you can usually create a UDP connection. Well, UDP doesn't really have connections, but therein lies how this works, is that for NAT to operate with UDP at all, it kind of has to figure out what is sort of a connection. Like when two computers are trying to communicate with each other, it has to recognize that and kind of temporarily create a port forwarding. And so NAT hole punching uses that by kind of starting a conversation with a third party from two different locations in such a way that those two locations can then start communicating to each other using the same firewall ports or the same like NAT port forwards that were opened for that initial connection to that third party. And so there's a standard for that used by WebRTC. It's called Stun, I think. What is that? I keep forgetting which one is Stun and which one is Turn. I think Turn is the one that actually forwards all the traffic. Yeah, Session Traversal of User Datagram Protocol. So yeah, Stun is it's a standard protocol. There are some public Stun servers, so you don't have to run your own necessarily. And I think PeerTube uses a public Stun server. And it just does connection establishment, where you connect to the Stun server from two different places, and then it helps those two different parties establish direct connections. So WebRTC, like, I don't know, like, I think people kind of misunderstand sometimes like what WebRTC is useful for, what it isn't useful for, which problems it solves, which problems it doesn't solve. But one problem it does actually solve pretty well is NAT traversal. Like, I mean, there are a lot of cases where you just can't do NAT traversal, and so then you do need some kind of outside proxy server kind of thing, which is what Turn is. But its implementation is pretty nice, and that would be just so much work to implement yourself. So it does seem like a nice starting point for a lot of other protocols. And so WebTorrent, which is a variation of this traditional torrent protocol built on top of WebRTC, it uses Stun by consequence. So yeah, if I just went to a video, some of these are kind of experimental. Like the 4K video, when you actually view it in 4K, like I don't know about this computer. When I was trying this on my laptop was seriously struggling to keep up from a CPU point of view. This computer might be a little faster than my lappy. It's still not having a great time though. But it doesn't really make any sense to watch a 4K video at this resolution anyway. This one was also a test. I guess the art videos, some of them were more tests. Yeah, this one was also kind of an encoder torture test. This one gets really high bitrate because of all the lines. If you watch it at a lower resolution, it might actually work because it's not super high bitrate. Or if you let it load completely, maybe. This is not a very good advertisement for PeerTube showing you my torture test videos. I mean, it's nice when this does work because like YouTube would not let you upload a video this high bitrate. They would just transcode it to a lower bitrate, but I uploaded this mostly to attach it to a bug report. This one works correctly, but it's also just like kind of raw footage. Oh yeah, so WebTorrent is not even just like BitTorrent, but built with WebRTC. WebTorrent is actually compatible with BitTorrent. It's not like 100% compatible in that, you know, if you're speaking only with torrent clients that don't support WebRTC, then you're not going to have a great time, which is currently kind of the problem. like WebTorrent clients pretty much only end up being able to talk to other WebTorrent clients in practice, even though theoretically clients could support both protocols. The code just isn't there yet as far as I can tell, but that's clearly something that's designed to work. It just needs more implementation. But anyway, yeah, some of this works better. The normal, like, not super long videos, I think they tend to have a pretty good experience. So like Coaster Melt, this just starts pretty quickly. I think your mileage may vary depending on the internet weather at the time, because this is a single server and not a CDN, but these are probably mostly pretty good. Look at all that tiny hair. I had no hair at that point. Yeah, one current problem is if you open one of the long stream archives, it can take a little while to load, just because it takes a little while to download this index at the beginning of the H.264 file that includes like block locations for all the, for all the rest of the video. So I would like to improve this. There's a bug open. I'd like to work on it myself, but right now the state of it is that you have to download a few megabytes of index before you can display anything on these long videos. But then this is like a 7-hour video, so. And then once you've downloaded that, you can seek, and then it just has to buffer that specific location, and then it should start playing quicker, yeah. So yeah, I recently wrote this about page. Let me make this less tiny. So I was trying to make a bit more of a statement about what I'm actually trying to do with this particular server, because after all, there are a lot of PeerTube servers, and if you just want anything, any kind of PeerTube server, like let's just look at that instance list. There are a lot of general purpose instances out there at this point. So you can search by sign up. These are instances that allow you to create new accounts. They might have different rules for what you're allowed to upload and how much space they give you. You can sort by users and find the really big hubs here. And so yeah, some of these big servers that have a lot of users and also just follow everyone else, like PeerTube.social, this is intended to just be like a catch-all for pretty much whatever. And if you look at the about, well, so in this case, they don't want commercial content, which is cool. So it's like no commercial content, no illegal content, but and no commercial organizations. That's cool. Some PeerTube instances are more like specifically trying to avoid certain kinds of censorship or perceived censorship. It's pretty common for the descriptions to be basically like, don't upload anything that's illegal where the server is hosted, and, we'll try to take down copyrighted stuff. So I don't know, like, there are a lot of good places to post videos, probably. I wanted to try to make something that was centered around a topic area, for one, but that also was really focused on creating a nice space for creative community. And it seemed like for that, I would want to avoid just people like uploading stuff just because they can, and more having people upload stuff that they care about, or that they made, or that they have some personal connection to. So, it just seemed to be a good line to draw for my server, that I wanted it to be pretty much just about original content and, stuff that I can, expect to be pretty like rigidly Creative Commons licensed, and then to also just have some guidelines about what the content could be about, but not necessarily make it like this is only about electronics, but be like, well, we like electronics here, but like there's lots of stuff that we can do here. But then to really try to draw the other kind of hard line there in the area of kind of safety and like creating a community that's entirely harassment-free to the extent that we can make it. And trying to specifically avoid some of the patterns that I don't like to see YouTube falling into. So yeah, I'm just gonna like maybe read this and let me know if you have any content or any comments about the content of this page or the content of the potential site. So Diode Zone, a friendly place for original content with a focus on creativity and electronics. This little corner of the decentralized internet is a cozy place for creative and educational videos. We like electronics and art and cats, robots, whispering to tiny chips, and making nice places for plants, and anything else that inspires us or might inspire you. We like understanding and repurposing the wonderful junk in our lives, and we craft this into an experience to share with you through this glowy rectangle. This instance is for Creative Commons licensed content you've created yourself or as part of a team. Any kind of content is welcome as long as it follows the rules. The file size limit here is 20 gigs. Long and or high quality videos are welcome. I think the default is like 2 gigs. But yeah, that was something I was having trouble with just with the stream archives and a lot of the other stuff that I've been posting. Like, I needed something that would just be able to chew on giant files. So Piot's wondering if like what the comment systems are like on PeerTube versus YouTube. Yeah, so like right now PeerTube's comment system is still pretty immature. So it's missing a lot of features that I would like to see there. It doesn't really have any moderation features to speak of, so a lot of that's going to have to be manual until it exists. That's like clearly a lack, but it's because PeerTube is like beta software right now, and that's just like one of those features that is under development and is going to need to be there before it actually hits 1.0. So that's still a work in progress. But there's some promising aspects of it because the comments are just ActivityPub interactions, just like the videos. So you can actually comment on PeerTube videos from, from inside Mastodon. You can subscribe to a PeerTube channel from other ActivityPub services like Mastodon. So it seems like that could be really nice in the near future, and it's starting to already be nice where, I can already start to see videos from creators like showing up on Mastodon, and I can share them with folks on Mastodon, and that's been nice. If you reply on Mastodon, that reply will show up as a comment on the PeerTube site. So yeah, the whole thing where it's built on top of this open architecture, that seems really nice. The specific tools need work, but it seems like it's pointed in our right direction. Yes, toots do appear in the comments for PeerTube, if you're asking, which is a strange sentence. But yeah, let me see if I can find an example of that. Are any of these commented? I think some of these that I posted early had comments. Scroll all the way to the bottom of the recently added. Oh yeah, I think this one in comments. No? Maybe that had comments. I posted the same video on a different PeerTube server. Maybe that's what I was thinking of. Okay, I don't know why it just reloaded right then and sent me back to page 1, but that was a bug. So could I comment? Could I just comment as a demo here? Just reload this to get the actually latest video. So I could comment from here. Let me see if I can get my phone on this and show you that. I don't think I'm logged into Mastodon from this demo machine, or I guess I could do it here too. Let's try this. Just testing all the infrastructure today. Can I has phone? Which channel is it? This one? Yeah. Alright, so this is a PeerTube client called Amarok, and I just entered at PeerTube at diode.zone into the search, which is a little bit obtuse at the moment, but because I don't think this is especially discoverable, but that's an account that just lists all the videos on the instance. I could have also searched for at scanlime-in-progress just to find mine, but this seemed handy. And so these individual posts, these items here are PeerTube videos. They also appear like tweets or like toots do in the Mastodon interface because they're the same basic kind of object, which is an activity pub something. It's some kind of activity pub thing. I forget what they actually are called. Are they posts? I know activity pub calls something that is capable of doing things an actor. So like I think PeerTube is an actor, Scanlime is an actor. A particular channel at Scanlime I think is also an actor. I don't know how those actually show up in ActivityPub though, so that's an interesting thing to investigate maybe. But I could click one of these links and it would open that in a web browser. It does the usual thing where it's a little slow because it's a long video, but then I can get in here. What should I do? Cat photos are always appropriate, right? Yeah, so that's like a basic demo of how this works, and that shows my Mastodon username, scanlime-in-progress. Oh, this one seems fun. Driving some winches, we could do some of that. Anyway, yeah, so that's the phone-based Mastodon experience. All right, so then the terms. I'm getting back to this. So I don't want to like read everything here because like these things are always kind of a bummer to read. But I guess just like the specific things I wanted to mention. It has the usual things you'd expect, like nothing that's illegal, you know, and I call out a few specifically bad things that I would want to prohibit, which you know are also illegal. But I just want to like make it obvious that this is not allowed. But then there's also some stuff that, you know, is maybe more of a gray area. Like I do actually want to be pretty particular about respecting IP and copyright here, just because I think that actually also, I mean, I think that that's useful for the long-term health of the community. It also goes pretty well with the goal of promoting original content rather than just like stuff that you found on the internet somewhere. So the one thing that I thought might be kind of a bummer for a lot of creators in this space is that if you've already got videos you've made from YouTube and you've used YouTube library music, that could be a problem. You might have to redo the music. And yeah, so like, yeah, no clickbait. And then some like specific anti-harassment stuff. So like no video of other people without their consent. You know, some like specific anti-harassment text here. But then also just, you know, trying to set the general tone here that we want this to be a place for kind of helping other people out and not excluding people. So, you know, you can't just like, you know, you can't apply that to everyone, right? Like you can't welcome the harassers into your space, but you can try to avoid excluding people without a really good reason. And I think that's, something to strive for in this space too. But yeah, and I guess some of this is just a response to like the internet or the electronics communities I see in a lot of places on the internet, which seem to just like almost take pride in being like treehouse clubs for horny boys, or like guys who just want to like play with their power tools or something. And like, I'm sure some people on the instance might feel that way, and I'm not gonna like exclude them just because like they like that stuff, but I don't want it to be a place where that's like celebrated. So I want to set the tone in a different way, and if people do cross the line with their content, then I'm not gonna have that on my server, right? So yeah, so that's like basically it. And as far as this, the user registration, I'm probably going to open this to some invitations to people who've already expressed interest. If you're interested, just let me know. I'll send you an invite. But I'm actually not going to let anyone else onto the server until the transcode queue empties, because right now if you uploaded a video, it just wouldn't do anything. And that should happen sometime in the next few days. Add to the job queue right now. We have 286 jobs in the transcode queue. So as soon as that reaches 0, it'll actually be open for additional videos, and I'll send out some invites. And if things don't explode too badly, then I might just enable general signups, and we'll see how that goes. So yeah, that's the server. It's been good on disks, good on cooling. It's hanging out in that little corner of the shop. So yeah, I think that's it for the PeerTube talk today. Let's get back to the physical world and take a look at some of these energy monitor devices. Yeah, Piot says since it's my server, I make the rules. Well, that is kind of the blessing and the curse of the Fediverse, right? Is that you're pretty much at the whims of the server, but the server is not a giant corporation. It's an individual or a small group or something, which is good and bad, right? Like, it's harder for a corporation to just completely flake out on you without, causing huge like global problems. Like, Google isn't just gonna like lose your mail, right? Whereas if you run your server, if you run your email on your friend's server, they might just lose your mail. If you put your videos on YouTube, YouTube probably isn't going to just like lose your videos because they forgot to back up a server, but they might just like remove your videos for some arbitrary legal or political or social reason. The same thing happens with any other third-party hosting. Like, you send me your videos, and I'll try not to lose them, but I might, and I might just delete them because of some other reason. So, like, you pretty much always have to trust the admin of your server to some extent. And yeah, I think really, ultimately, we want it to be easier for more people to be their own host and not have to rely on other people. But like, there's always going to be this trade-off between like what's really practical from just like a yak shaving point of view. Like, you can't always be spending your time on the sysadmin aspect of things. You have to just like do things sometimes. So like, at some point it probably makes sense not to do everything yourself, but to have other people like run a service. But when you do that, you're creating this trust relationship that you need to understand. Yeah, I ran my own mail server for a long time. Sometimes I think I should do that again. I mean, I don't know, it's gotten harder to send and receive mail on the internet in the last couple of decades, though. I was even just trying to set up, outgoing mail for my PeerTube server, and kind of gave up on just doing that myself, and so I'm doing that through like a third-party service that runs an SMTP server. Just because actually having an IP that people will accept mail from is like kind of a boutique item these days. Yeah, and then Piot says they would like it if we could federate the servers such that the content is mirrored. There's actually a change in the develop branch already that is a step in that direction. So yeah, the PeerTube developers are definitely working on that. And I would be happy to find, like, that also kind of ties into the, well, like, who do I follow on Diode Zone? Who follows me? Like, what do the politics of that look like? Because I don't necessarily want to mirror a bunch of content that I wouldn't want to host, but then again, I also want to be able to find the content that I do want to be able to mirror and get that on my server. So, you know, it's like good that it's not automatic, I think. It's good that the administrators have to put some thought into it, but it also means that there's more of like a social network diffusion factor at work. Yeah, let's take a look at these real world objects here. So I mentioned I was doing some energy monitoring. Maybe I should actually show you that on the computer. I keep switching between the real and the virtual. It's disorganized. Oh yeah, some of these temperature sensors are not real. I think this Linux box named Spacer, I think it's LM Sensors, is a bit optimistic and has some stuff in it that is not actually a sensor. But mostly you can see the temperatures and the power. Zooming out a little bit. It takes a bit of time to actually run the database queries on these. Oh gosh, yeah, Pio, if you want to host your stuff on Diode Zone, I'd love to have you on there. I mean, I think that goes for anybody in the chat room. Like, if any of you want to be on Diode Zone, you're completely welcome as soon as the server is actually open for more transcodes. Like, yeah, totally. Just, I think the best way to do that is to probably, you're welcome to send me a DM either on Mastodon or on Twitter. I'm at scanlime on Twitter or at scanlime@kittytown on Mastodon. And I will add you to the list of people that I will mail. I don't know if PeerTube has a built-in system for invitations. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. I might have to do something where I like ask you what username you want and then generate a temporary password and then like DM you the temporary password. I don't know if there's a good system for that yet. I might also get lazy and just like open the server for general registrations and then just ping everyone who's asked me to let them know. I don't know. It's probably more prudent just to let in people that I've like directly had some contact with, but like all of you are certainly welcome. And yeah, we're just waiting for the transcodes. I wanted to get my archive in there just so that it had a place to live that isn't just YouTube and one of my external hard disks. But and I mean, as far as other people, if any of you have big video archives that you want to dump in there, as long as it, you know, is also original content and you're not just like scraping archive.org, then you're welcome. We just might need to coordinate to make sure that we don't completely overwhelm the transcoder 100% of the time. But yeah, no, I'm into having just like a good archive of kind of creative content on there if people have original stuff that they want to upload. Oh, that's cool. Carrick wants to have a cooking-based instance. That would be great. I mean, you're welcome to have cooking content on Diode Zone, but yeah, it seems like maybe a cooking-focused instance could be pretty great too. Yeah, I mean, I like the instances that have a theme, right? I mean, I feel like if you try to have a site that's too general, then it just kind of becomes like a dumping ground for like just stuff that people don't really care that much about. Whereas if it's a site that has a particular theme, I think you can curate it a bit more, or like just encourage people to curate their own stuff a bit more. That said, I'm also the one uploading like a terabyte of live stream archives to this, so like I can't be on too high of a horse about curation. So yeah, there's that. Like, you're welcome to have space on my server. I mean, I've certainly gotten some disk donations that help out with this. I think I misspoke. I think I claimed that some of the donated disks are in Diode Zone. I think actually the donated disks end up in my editing machine, and the disks in Diode Zone are these older Seagate Barracuda drives that I used to use as offline storage. So they have very few spun up hours on them, so they're pretty new disks, but they're not like the fanciest disks in the world, but I've got them all mirrored. So anyway, graphs, right? Graphs are nice. Why is this one so bumpy? Yeah, so this is a stacked graph. This is showing all the power usage that I'm tracking in the shop. So the little one here is, little one, the like lavender colored band here of 300 watts. That's mostly diode zone. And then this larger one that's been varying a lot is the video equipment, which gets pretty power hungry when I'm streaming. This is a lot of why I wanted to move it across closer to the power, because that's just a lot of power to move across the room. Yeah, and then a bunch of things like wiggling around a little bit as disks turn on and off and CPU loads change. So we had pretty much a whole stream on these HS110 energy monitors, which I'll show these a little more closely on the monitor. But this is a plug-in, like kind of smart plug thing, an Internet of Things device, if you will, made by D-Link, or no, TP-Link, that other link that makes consumer junk. And you can find these kind of expensively, but I got these because I found a good price on them. I got them for like $15 each, which seemed pretty good. And they actually, it turns out from our last transcode, or our last, turns out from our last archive, I'm using those two words interchangeably, archive, transcoding. From our last archived stream, you might have seen inside these things, they use these pretty nice Maxim energy monitor chips that have like a little DSP, measures the voltage and current continuously. The chip actually supports using a current transformer or a shunt resistor for measuring the current, but in this case they're using a shunt resistor. So there is a resistance in here that is intentionally added to your 15 amp, 120 volt power, which is a little bit annoying, but it's only like a milliohm, so you're not really dissipating much power. But it's one of the things in here that generates a little bit of heat. So yeah, we opened these up previously. The internals are pretty interesting. It was basically a system on chip like you would find inside a Wi-Fi router on one board, and then a separate board that was all power electronics with a kind of an offline switching power supply design, plus this Maxim chip, which includes integrated ADD converters, and then that's connected over SPI back to the system on chip. So anyway, I've got a bunch of these in the shop. All of these lines here are captured by the HS110, and I've been trying to do energy monitoring with other devices also, and so I've been noticing just the differences between them and what I can get. And UPSs so far I've not been finding to be as accurate as these. So I've got a, well, to be fair, none of the UPSs I have here that I've actually put on here are actually reporting watts. I'm kind of having to reverse engineer the watts from some other metric. So for this one, I'm using the load percentage, which seems to be linearly related to watts. It just scales by what it thinks the maximum load is. And that seems to have tracked, so for a while I had this same load tracked by the UPS and by one of these, and they seem to track pretty well. And then getting even further off of the beaten path here, on the video rack I'm getting current by kind of reverse engineering it from the UPS runtime, which seems even slightly sketchier than using the load percentage. That'll definitely be inaccurate when the battery ages, but for the moment it seems to be roughly correct. And this is just frustrating because this UPS model does not seem to report the load percentage over USB, which is just, it just seems terrible, like an obvious firmware oversight. I even tried upgrading the firmware. Like I spent like an afternoon yak shaving all the problems associated with upgrading the firmware on my UPS, and still didn't help at all, really. So yeah, the UPSs are nice, although the HS110s still have pretty nice energy monitoring. So I wanted something that was like the HS110 in that it gives me good energy monitoring and switching, but maybe is not Wi-Fi, and maybe is like easier to secure. Like to get these to be secure, I had to put them on their own separate network because they don't have any built-in authentication really. And still, like if you cracked the Wi-Fi security on that network, you could turn these on and off, but whatever, that's probably secure enough. They don't work at all inside the rack because the rack is pretty much a big Faraday cage. I've even got like a wireless mouse that I can only use if it's right next to the rack. It's pretty good at cutting out those wireless frequencies. So these HS110s do not work at all inside the rack. So I also got this APC metered rack PDU, which is pretty much exactly what I want for the rack. I found it cheap on eBay, and I think we should tear this down and see what it does to measure power, and maybe compare a couple of different sorts of power measurement strategies. So we've got the HS110, which I've still got one of those open from the last teardown. I've also got a kilowatt here, which despite having this thing for ages, I've never actually opened it. So I think that could be cool to take apart. I also happened to have this APC power sensing power strip, which my cat has just thoroughly destroyed the cord on. So I think we should open this and do a teardown, and then maybe also put it aside until I can replace the cord. So yeah, how about that for a physical object agenda? SIGROC drivers for power monitors, that would be interesting. You mean for the SPI protocol? 'Cause yeah, that would be pretty interesting. This PDU is the thickest electrical cord in my entire shop. This is thicker than the rack, or not the UPS I have in this rack. That UPS is scary big. It's like a 2200 VA 2U UPS from a PC, and like yeah, that thing is beefier than any of the electrical circuits in this room, but this even more so. And then that UPS, I need to do a teardown on that UPS at some point to repair a circuit breaker. I still don't know how I managed to do this, but I just like blew out the 20 amp circuit breaker on that UPS just in the past week when I was doing all this rack maintenance and stuff. And I don't even know how that happened. Like, I think it was inrush current from something I connected to it. I was just doing a test and I was trying to add some more load to the UPS to do, I guess that was when I was doing this like runtime versus power kind of correlation. So I was plugging in some more load, and I plug in some load and everything turns off. And then I try to figure out what went wrong, and I trace it down to the circuit breaker on the 20 amp output from the UPS, and it just won't reset. So I think I blew a fuse on the motherboard somewhere, but the other outlets work, and I don't really want to take the UPS out of service right now, so I just put tape over those outlets, but I'm gonna have to fix that at some point probably. I'm gonna refill my coffee, and then let's go to the physical world. Slightly different view as I come back from coffee this time. Oh man, this is not good though. I've actually got some serious glare on this monitor. And it doesn't matter hugely because I need the physical space more than I need the monitor right now, but I can't see chat. The glare is like right over the chat window. Well, one solution is to pull it up down here and put it on the other side of the screen. So many objects. Yeah, exactly. The AC to banana plug adapters. Oh, interesting. I just wasn't sure whether this was for debugging something that uses these chips, like from an embedded systems level, or whether we were talking about using SIGROC to like log data long term or something. That's cool. I didn't know SIGROC supported oscilloscopes. Or multimeters. This is cool. I don't have a sound level meter anywhere around here. Might be interesting to find one so that I can actually measure decibels occasionally. Huh. Is that like a BeagleBone add-on? Okay, so this is an industrial thing with... Oh, for whole house meters in France. And then this is a BeagleBone add-on. Oh gosh, this glares. I feel like it's gonna be gone in like 15 minutes though. Okay, yeah, I can't really read any of this anywhere right now. Oh, yeah, actually... Oh, actually, I should plug that in. I actually have a ground lead for this static mat, which I forgot to replug. Maybe I can show you how I made it. But yeah, it's just a plug that goes to snap for the wrist strap, and then this goes to the mat here. And these are just wired to the ground. It looks a little sketchy if you haven't opened it to see that the hot and neutral are not connected. Oh, you mean to view the ground current? Oh, that is sketchy. That's great. Oh, these little Velcro ties can be fussy sometimes, but they're so worth it. Do you ever get a song stuck in your head, but you just don't even want to mention that song to other people? It's like, as you worry about infecting them. Earworms, right? I just really want this ground strap attached, don't mind me. There's actually a free outlet, like a real wall outlet for that one. Oh, Tuco Flyer, aka butt cam. I gotta do something about this glare, actually. Is that enough? That's probably enough. Oh, Michael's wondering if Tuco likes the Velcro ties. Oh, that's a good question. I have not seen him take a specific interest in the Velcro ties, although I'll have to try playing with him. See if he takes a liking. All right, let's go into the kilowatt first, since I think it's kind of classic. I think a lot of you might have the same device, but maybe you've opened it, maybe you haven't. I'm still using the sandbag as an anti-wobble solution. It's not amazing. I really need to have a screwdriver assortment a little closer than it currently is. Yeah, that needs work. Screwdrivers are currently on the exact opposite corner of the room. Yeah. Gosh, that glare. All right, the P4400 kilowatt, a pretty classic voltage current meter, voltage, current, frequency, power. So I think somebody was saying on the last stream where we were digging into the HS110 that this has a current shunt as well. Let's get a fresh video file. We are so close to the end of this file. Oh yeah, I have not seen the British version of the kilowatt. I'm also noticing the face cam is going a bit overexposed right now. I can fix that. So much glare. Oh, actually that overexposed area is the glare. Oh, did I freeze OBS? I didn't just crash OBS, did I? Don't have a lot of granularity in the exposure, but that should do. There's a snap. Oh, or maybe this just isn't out all the way. Cool. Got some flux residue on there, huh? So big old ground connected directly to the ground receptacle and to nothing else. Got a fuse over here and a relay. Is that a relay? Might be a capacitor. Oh yeah, that's a safety capacitor. X1. Let's just get all this out so it's easier to look at. Just seeing the big components there. There's, yeah, capacitor, fuse, the socket. A big link here, which I think is the measurement shunt. Just this big old wire link. I would not expect this resistor to be... This is not their measurement resistor. This is probably for a power supply. It's probably got a resistive capacitive dropper for its own local power supply. Oh, cool. OBS has not crashed. Sometimes OBS, I think, it's still streaming in the background, but the UI falls behind a little bit. And this is only happening because I have this machine so overloaded at the moment. I keep thinking it might be a good idea to put Tuco Flyer on its own computer. If I reorganize the rack a little bit, I might have room for that. Alright, so we've got the dust magnet there. All the lint you want will get stuck to that little clear window, and then the actual conductive rubber buttons. Cool, so here's the thing. So much glare. This power supply has no isolation, right? This whole thing is going to be run off of a capacitive dropper and just pretty much directly connected to mains. There's no reason for them to use an isolated power supply. And I think the processor is going to be under here. These little zebra strips are kind of treacherous because realigning the LCD if you take one of these off may not actually work. So I don't know if I actually want to take this off. There's a 78L05 on here. Oh man, I want to take this to the microscope. I've got the video working for the microscope, although I don't have the microscope stand actually set up right now. So maybe I could clamp that in the vise here. Makeshift microscope stand. I had this awful light stand and C-clamp contraption holding the microscope before, and I might end up setting something like that up again, but I was trying to do better. I just didn't have that actually done yet. I get cat hair on the LCD already. Did any of you feel that? That was not an earthquake. I think one downside of this corner is that I have a neighbor who is, I think, lifting weights a lot, or dropping weights, I guess would be the important part here. And I think they often drop weights very close to this area. I think they might be just on the other side of this wall. All right, the other bit of infrastructure I was struggling to get working yesterday was the microscope recorder. I'm gonna start that. It's over here on this monitor now. Just trying to move the, yeah. Cool. That's another instance of OBS using a Blackmagic capture device to grab the microscope video for later editing. Oh no! Michael was modifying a nightlight that used a capacitive dropper and swapping out the LEDs, and then the manufacturer switched from screws to ultrasonic welding. Yeah, that's frustrating. So yeah, 78L05. This is a really classic 5-volt regulator. So presumably this is the local logic supply. So which one is ground here? Is the tab ground? Let's just get a quick 78L05 pin out. I've used 78L05s in the like a 3-pin TO220 package so much, but haven't actually used them in surface mount, really. Not enough to memorize the pin out. Yeah, the two middle pins are both ground here. And V out, V in. This is really... I have the text right set up, but everything else is upside down in this setup. Oh, that's much better. Well, it's better for me. Let me make it better for you. Oh, that's right. This whole thing is adjustable in several helpful ways. Yeah. Completely different lighting, huh? I think that's... the lamp over here is slightly tangled. Yeah, having a light that you can move around easily is really nice on a microscope, because there's often just like one angle that makes the text really jump out on the chips. In this case, the default lighting actually seems all right. Oh, Aiden's wondering what the e-stop on top of the VFD does. That is connected to the emergency power off on the UPS in that rack, so it'll turn off all the equipment in that rack. That's there because the UPS in that rack is kind of scary high power, and it's just like, if I need a way to prevent like 20 amps of electricity from going into something it shouldn't be in the rack, then that button is a quick way to do so. Oh yeah, hi Son of the Cakes, nice to see you. Sorry I'm like not quite as attentive to chat as I usually try to be, because the chat machine is over there, and I guess I need to point this slightly. Yeah. Alright, so anyway, that middle one is ground, and we decided that the left is V out, so that left is 5 volts. They're making a VCC over 2, so that, or no, not over 2, but like some kind of voltage reference of some sort over there. That actually goes down somewhere under here. Yeah, it's a little hard to tell what's going on unless we're willing to take the LCD off. That is a flux gunge nugget right there. Anyway, the interface between this and the other circuit board is pretty thin. It's a weird frequency, 4.194304. It's also got, I don't know if we need the microscope for the backside here. So yeah, it's got the buzzer. It's also got this J1 here, which is interesting. It looks like that could be a serial port, perhaps. This looks like just a halfway rectifier circuit. This capacitor is 35 volts, 100 microfarads. And it's connected directly across the input to that 7805 regulator, which also goes to just the middle 2 pins on this ribbon. Yeah, and that diode, I don't know what that might be for. It's connected to 2 of these half-watt resistors. That might be for like a zero crossing detector or the voltage measurement. And then this is the actual resistance measurement shunt. So the power between these 2 sockets, so you can see this is, I think this is hot and this is neutral if I remember right. I often get those backwards, don't take my word on it. Let's actually look that up. Yeah, so the outlet, the right one, which is also the smaller blade, should be hot. So I've seen this in other monitors where they let the hot pass through, or they switch the hot and then they measure the current on the neutral. Not really sure why they do that. They've got this labeled as C1, but they have spots for several different sizes of capacitor. So yeah, you can kind of see a trace coming off from hot down to this other leg of the capacitor. And the fuse. Oh, or maybe just the fuse. Maybe this goes to the fuse and then to the capacitor. That would make the most sense. And then it also heads out to... So hot from the line is actually connected to that ribbon cable too. So like these boards are obviously no isolation at all. Like these are... Yeah, right? Is that actually hot and neutral just on adjacent pins on this connector? I mean, it does go through the fuse still, so the fuse is fed by hot on the other side. Ends up on that bottom pin. And then this second pin here is neutral. Current shunt. And then we have these two traces directly across the shunt. And those are going to be fed into some kind of differential amplifier where it's measuring the tiny voltage across that shunt and using that for current. So if I were to like shave a little bit of metal off of here, I would actually change the calibration completely. Oh yeah, interesting. James says that the board is marked as being for 250 volts in places, so the different models for different voltages probably just have different size caps here. Yeah. Oh yeah, Jarrett, what is Mike's technique for cracking ultrasonic welds? I haven't heard of that. Well, I don't know if there's anything else to do without potentially destructively taking off the LCD here. It's certainly possible we could take off the LCD and then put it back on and it would be fine, but I don't really want to bet on that. I kind of like this kilowatt and don't want to destroy it. So we got to see what I was interested in though, which is the current shunt. So let's put this back together and then open the power strip thing. Just make sure that's in good shape. I think all these screws on this layer are the same. It feels nice to be streaming again, and it feels nice to be streaming from a setup that is slightly less broken than before, and which I have some optimism about. So that's pretty nice. Huh, Mike says you can smack the welds with a handle of a screwdriver and they open? That seems like an old wives' tale. What a weird term. I heard that from an old wife myself. Okay. I kind of want to test this so that we know whether I've broken my kilowatt or not. Pretty simple device. Much simpler than the HS110, and these often sell for more. Oh yeah, I mean that sounds like it would work, the smacking it with the screwdriver, if the ultrasonic weld was like really not made very well, if they just didn't have the machine set up that day. Because I figure, you know, if you're operating an ultrasonic welding machine and you don't have all the parameters dialed in, you're going to need to get it working, and maybe you still sell those. You know, the ones that didn't quite weld right. Can we try this out? I do have a power strip over here for testing purposes. LCD seems alright. I don't know why it always starts out showing voltage. Maybe they assume that without anything plugged in, the amps would be boring. But I kind of wish it just always defaulted to watts. But yeah, it seems alright. I could try, what do I have to plug into this? How about a heat gun? I mean, to be honest, if we're talking about shunt resistors, I do like the shunt resistor in here better than the HS110, because this is a chunk of wire. The HS110 was just a surface mount thing. Seems low. Let me show you the range of voltages I get here. That seems perfectly fine. But I appreciate your concern, except not really. That's 1,000 watts. If I do this too much, I wonder if I might blow a circuit breaker. Let's see what the energy graphs show, actually. Yeah, I'm curious. I think I should be able to measure something else, which is getting a very similar voltage. So this claims, without the heat gun on, 113.1 volts. Was that us just now? I think that was. So yeah, this is very similar to the voltages you're seeing for like lighting and winch 1 and video desk and main desk. Like those are all plugged into the same outlet. So yeah, that seems like the voltage is about accurate. You can see pretty clearly the two phases of electricity we have here. But yeah, and this is not on any of the HS110s, so the power used by this won't actually show up on the other graph. But it is actually on the same circuit as this purple thing that's using like 800 watts. So this is coming pretty close to the limit of a 15 amp circuit. Yeah, I don't usually see this below 110 volts. Alright, well that's our kilowatt operating properly. Let's take apart this APC thing. Well, that doesn't narrow it down, does it? We've got two APC things. Let's take apart the consumer APC thing, and then let's take apart the rack mount APC thing. Plus or minus 25%. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, like, all the important equipment is on a UPS that does automatic voltage regulation anyway, so I'm not that concerned. But it is interesting to know about, I guess. Alright, let's move the microscope aside for a moment. And I think I'm just gonna cut the plug off of this thing because like my cat just loves chewing on thick power cords. You can see I've protected parts of this, but it's really I think I put the protection on after most of this damage happened, but it's just like chewed up enough that I don't really want to use it a lot as is. Yeah, I don't know. I've got cords that are worse, but like I try not to use them much. I don't think he's actually penetrated the internal insulation, but he really bites the external insulation a lot. So yeah, this area right here is the worst. So I think I'm going to cut it right after this area, and then if I end up using this in the future, I will put a new plug on this cord or replace the whole cord. And this gets thrown away. Or, because the thing is, Tuco might enjoy chewing on this, but I really don't want to encourage him to chew on power cords, both because I don't want him to chew on power cords that he might find elsewhere, and I don't know that this rubber is like the safest thing for him to chew on anyway. So, I don't know, he likes it, but I tried to give him other things to chew on, like toys. And one thing he does chew on, that I let him get away with, is he chews on bungee cords. So like there's a rubber core and then like a cloth exterior. He really likes that. Alright, how do we get in this thing? Four Phillips head screws. Rack mount. Oh, are you asking about the rack mount UPS or the rack mount PDU? I forget what the capacity. This is the PDU. Like I just got this thing on eBay, and we're gonna take a look at it in just a sec. What model is this? AP7801. Yeah, it's 120 volt, 16 amps. I don't know why the cord is so big if it's only rated at 16 amps. I thought it was actually a little bigger than that, but yeah. The UPS I have in the rack, I've got a couple of APC UPSs, but the big one is, it's a Smart UPS 2200 rack mount 2U. Yeah. Yeah, this is the only switched PDU. I've got some passive PDUs, but this is the only smart PDU I have right now. Oh yeah, food grade silicone objects. I should give Tuco some of those. I like the way you think, Pete. This has some strange screw placement. It has like a little pocket with a screw in it over here. Have a good dinner, Pete. Thanks for dropping by. Oh, it is actually really cool being able to see out the window while I'm streaming. That's pretty nice. I'll give you a brief window view. That's what I got right now. Birds. Tuco's probably still asleep upstairs, but I think he'd be into that. Yeah, the 2200 VA over UPS is slightly overkill even for my situation here. Like I can be like right now it's probably drawing about 1 kilowatt, and I could run it for like an hour just fine. And then I've got a 1000 VA UPS in the other rack, which is sufficient, but not overly so. Like it's kind of just barely sufficient, actually. That one only usually ends up running at about 300 watts, but I would like slightly more runtime than 20 minutes if I could. Yeah, I've been moderately happy with that 2200 VA UPS, although not the most so. Like, it's actually got some pretty annoying firmware. that doesn't report all the options you'd think it should, and doesn't really work nicely with APC UPSD. So yeah, it's okay. It's a big old beast. I like it. It hasn't failed me yet, other than that stupid 20 amp breaker blowing out. Yeah, that's the other thing is I completely just like blew out the 20 amp breaker on that UPS, and I don't think it really had a good reason to blow, so I'm a little annoyed at that too. This is not coming out. Magnet. Fine. Oh, this just wants a spudger. I am too disorganized to spudge. Here's my spudger. This is more like a shiv than a spudger, but sure. Little shitty spudge. Oh, there are 2 more screws deep in here I missed. That explains it. There we go. Oh, that comes off pretty easily. It's just a single weirdly shaped piece of plastic. So this has some isolation for all the outlets, it looks like. Not much, more like just ground holes. Huh. Yeah, weird. So the ground is just this like strippy thing which has been trying to come out. So this is the separate, I guess the separate hot, or that is the hot, right? Yeah. For the switched outlet, and then this looks like a common neutral, and then one hot, another hot. I think some of these are switched and some of these aren't. Yeah, so this is the master, the controlled by master, and then the regular ones, the always on. And then 2 separate circuit boards. It looks like this one is just the like telephone surge protector thing, maybe with a ground wire. So let's take that out. I never use these ports. I have no telephone equipment. I have no landline. I have no need for these. Not really sure what to do with these circuits though. It's just some mobs. Mobs and PTCs. So these are components that become close to short circuits as the voltage increases. So they help to avoid large high voltage transients. And these are PTC thermistors, so they're like resistors that, what are those actually used for? Those are used in line with the mobs, I think. I think the idea is normally the PTC acts like a short circuit, like a pass-through, but if it starts to pass a lot of current, it heats up, and then it temporarily becomes like an open circuit. So they're basically like resettable fuses. And so those are in line with the data. And then on this side, So I'm assuming these are the devices, or this is like the side you'd connect to the phone lines, and this is the side you connect to the devices that you're protecting. Is that right? This just labels them out and in, which is a little bit ambiguous, but all right. And then it's all referenced, or these mobs. So it's got one mob across the lines, and then one mob between each line and ground, so that if you have spikes that aren't different between the two lines, like if it's not a voltage differential across the phone lines, but a voltage differential between both phone lines and ground, then that's what this catches, and that's why it needs the ground wire. And it's got a little resettable circuit breaker over here. Let's take out the main board. Yeah, I think I'll get more runtime out of the little rack once it's not doing video transcodes 24/7. But one thing I might do is have it like suspend the video transcode processes once it gets a message from the UPS, and then that should give me more UPS runtime. Okay, we have no screws. It looks like we might have, oh yeah, there's like some light guide stuff going on. And then just a lot of wire. I don't know if this is going back together. Let's find out though. I think I've got to take these bits of the multi-outlet socket out to get the board out. Looks like they're fairly straightforward to put in and out though. As long as I don't bend them or mangle them too badly. I'm unplugging this from the switch. The switch comes out the other way. Cool. I can take the switch out now, which might be fun if we were going to completely part this out. I'll leave that in there for now. That looks like a current transformer. That's actually pretty nice. And then this looks broken. Where did this break? This broke off from the switch, and it was supposed to connect where now? So like, this is the hot, like the line comes in through the circuit breaker, through the switch. So this goes to the switch, this goes to the switch, and then the other end broke off. I assume this happened as I was taking it out, but it must have been ready to break. And that's a little scary having a flapping around hot lead in your chassis, right? Where was that supposed to go? This looks like it broke off of something soldered through the board. That looks like this track. It's labeled MTG1. I'm assuming that isn't Magic the Gathering. But it's also labeled line in black. Yeah, that's a little disconcerting, right? I wasn't entirely planning on putting this back into service, and maybe at this point it's seeming even less likely. But it seems like there's some good parts in here. Let's see what else is going on. So the line comes in through here. This is the neutral, this thing right next to it. And then what else do we have? It looks like neutral goes to a link right here. This is a single-sided board, by the way. It's interesting. And any processor? It looks like we just have this one chip. This area over here looks a little bit heat damaged, but it's hard to tell if that's just flux or something. Oh, it's heat damaged on the top too. These two diodes. I wonder if that's part of the local power supply. Is this a dropper capacitor? This is 2.2 microfarads, 250 volts to 275 volts AC. So then the hot side, let's follow that. So like neutral goes to a couple of internal things. It goes to this dropper capacitor, and then to the neutral that all the outlets share. Hot comes in here, this like blown out cold solder joint, which is really not good. Okay, this capacitor is across line and neutral, so this is a safety capacitor, a safety rated, yeah, it's X2 rated, and this is going to be for EMI suppression. So this is just filtering off transients. It's across line and neutral. What else? This goes to a MOV here. So it's got these clusters of MOVs and temperature switches kind of cozied up together. So if these MOVs start getting really hot, like they're processing a lot of surge voltage, then these temperature switches will break open and cut the circuit. That's labeled fuse F1 on the circuit board. That's a thermal fuse. Fuse F2 over here. So yeah, we've got neutral, or that's hot. We've got hot coming in through the MOV. I assume that's just input surge protection. That signal goes elsewhere too. Like there's a resistor over here that taps off that signal, and it goes over here to this transistor and stuff. So they might be using that to sense whether the surge protection is working or something like that. And then that mostly goes over here. This brown wire that comes out right here is the unswitched outlets. So all the outlets that are just on all the time go through this track. And then this is the relay that switches the other outlets. It looks like this brown box. So the switched outlets go to this relay, which then connects to this hot track right here. Then lastly, we have the current transformer. So this wire goes through this transformer. So it's one wire in the middle and then a bunch of turns of another coil around that single wire. So as the current for the master device flows through this single wire, it induces a voltage, well, a current and a voltage in this other coil, which goes to an amplifier over here somewhere. Probably part of this chip. So what is that chip? That's like the only thing other than transistors in the active circuitry department, at least. That's LM324. I think that's a comparator. That would make sense in this circuit. Let's just check that. Yeah, low power quad op amp. Okay. So yeah, this is all analog. That's pretty fun. It's also all mains referenced, so if you were going to get creative with the circuit, you would need to add your own isolation, which is something you really only want to do if you're experienced in mains voltage circuitry. But there are probably some interesting points where you could tap off the current waveform here and maybe do something else with it, or even just use this current transformer on its own with an O-scope. Yeah, well, that's a good data point. So what did we learn from this? We learned that it uses a current transformer, it's all analog, it doesn't have a microcontroller, it's got cold solder joints, which makes me unlikely to use it for much at this point, but we can use it for parts. Yeah, James says that MTG7 white wire also looks kind of sketchy. Yeah, like all the soldering here, it seems like it would have been hard for them to QA this especially well, right? Like making sure that you get an appropriate amount of heat saturation on the circuit board and the wire to do this. Like I think that was the problem here. Like this wire just pulled out cleanly. Like this was never a good solder job. So I don't know about that. Like I might be tempted to use this if I needed it and I went back over all the solder joints, but I think I'm more likely to scrap this at this point. Like it's not really worth, like it's not really especially useful to me at this point as a device, and it's also not especially safe. So I think I might just put it in the parts bin at this point. Also, Tuco destroyed most of the cable, so yeah. Well, it's got some good parts though. Some of these contacts might be useful. I don't know. Mostly the stuff on the circuit board though, and possibly the breaker. So I'll put this aside. Gracefully chuck it over there for now until I can put the parts in more sensible locations. Yeah, this multi-outlet's been kind of on the chopping block for a while now. It was not extremely useful and seemed like the Tuco chomping was a major problem. And now I know that that wasn't the only major problem. Okay. So I think we've got one more device to take a look at, unless we wanted to take another look at the HS110, but unless anyone really has questions about that, I think I'll just defer to my previous video about that, the previous stream. Since this does seem to be emerging into a bit of a theme on the power measurements, it might be nice to turn this into an edited video, so I'll think about how to make that happen. Let me know if you have ideas or contributions for that. Alright, now this thing's a bit better. I am going to be voiding the warranty by opening this one. And I've been trying to keep Tuco from eating this. This is going into the rack, so in the rack I don't need to protect the wires because my cat's not allowed into the rack, but at least until I've installed it, I need to protect the wires, otherwise he'll just chomp on them. Alright, so this has rack ears on the side, which might come off first. It's also got this wire organizer, which seems to come off separately. And then screws on the top, warranty sticker right here. I might not even have to open the ears though. It looks like there's one piece of metal that is the top and the back, and then another piece that's the bottom and the sides. Yeah, let's just start taking out screws. I think we probably want to take a bunch of this stuff off anyway. Yeah, the light's nice. I don't know how much Tuco Flyer debugging time we're going to have today, but I'm also looking forward to doing more of that. I feel like smooth motion is so close. Like it's just got a couple more bugs between us and actually being able to just kind of glide around nicely. These are so nice, but they are. Ears. These are not legs. It seems to be, at one point, was tracking this. This thing sticker. I'm a little surprised they didn't take this stuff off for shipping, actually. It seems like it would have been a little good. Oh yeah, no, I have not edited anything about the HX110s yet. For this too, yeah. Pardon me. So many little pieces of metal here. Okay, now we're down to the boxy part. See owner's manual. Yes, I've looked at the owner's manual. Oh yeah, let me know if anybody's having problems with the connectivity, especially on diode zone. I should really test my anti-static stuff again. I don't think I have, I don't have anything specialized for doing that, but I think I can at least measure resistance with the meter I've got and get something reasonable. Like you don't want a direct connection to ground, but you want something in the mega ohms range. Oh, interesting. So we got a couple of reports that the string cut out for a sec. A backup just started, if that matters. That might have been related. Doesn't seem to have affected latency much. So that could just be a coincidence. But yeah, the backups are a little CPU and network intensive. Yeah, that was like a requirement before I offer this to anyone, is I wanted to have a good backup system. So it does these continuous offsite backups to B2, which seemed all right. All right, is that everything? I think we need to take these screws out too, and then all that comes off. They're all the same kind of screw, at least. Oh, that's a great question. Mateus is wondering why you would want a resistance to ground for anti-static. If you had a direct connection to ground, I think, and please, if anybody else knows more about this than me, please correct me, but my understanding is that there's two reasons you'd want some resistance between you and ground. One is for the safety of yourself in case there's a fault on ground and there's some non-trivial voltage on the ground relative to some other object that is actually grounded, and you would want to prevent that from doing much bodily harm to any person that you're grounding, with a grounding strap. So that's one reason. I think the more pressing reason for the part that you're working on is often that if you had just a plate of copper that was grounded, for example, and you put a transistor down on it, you would probably just immediately destroy that transistor, because that would have some charge that would just instantly discharge to ground through that plate of copper. Whereas what you really want is usually a mat made of, this is a couple of layers of material that are, I think, different kinds of rubber with mixtures of carbon particles in it. So that's actually really high resistance. It's probably 10 mega ohms to ground. But stuff that you put on here will just slowly dissipate its static charge. Excuse me. So that's what you usually want for like working surfaces and for human wrist straps. If you're grounding some equipment, then you want that to be a direct connection just so that you have a good ground reference. Like that's usually when you want some like really solid ground. But yeah, for surfaces and wrist straps, you want some resistance. Otherwise it's not safe. Okay, I think I've just got to undo the warranty label now. It might be fun to see how tamper evident their sticker is, but I think I'm just going to cut it. Did that even cut? I might actually have to use a knife. Yeah, I think this needs to cut, and then this whole panel just slides forward. Oh, there's a screw directly under the sticker, of course. And it leaves these little void marks when you peel it off, which is fun. A lot of these tamper-evident stickers are not as tamper-evident as they really try to be, but you know, I'm not trying to perform warranty fraud or anything with this, so like I don't really care about the sticker. I wouldn't advise anyone to try to like cover up the fact that they've been inside something necessarily. Oh man, this is already beautiful. What's even going on here? So this is a nice bent piece of metal, some handwriting. This is very nice. Wow, big old bust thing. So these outlets are not individually metered, which is a bit of a disappointment. I was kind of assuming that they were, but I had not looked really closely because this was cheap on eBay and I figured I could use it really either way, but it looks like they just have a single metering system for all the outlets. It's kind of frustrating. But what's going on here? So they've got a stacked couple of boards over here. Huh. An APC branded flat pack processor thing over here. I assume that's like a router chipset over there. AT56753. Yeah, right, there's actually wiring. Yeah, this seems great. I'm pretty happy with this, even if it's not as measured as I wanted it to be. I'm just looking up this chip. Oh, this is Atmel. Oh, interesting. I searched for this part number, and one of the search results is actually a paper on the security analysis of this device. That's cool. So it's an intro on what a switched PDU is. There's a lot of the same vulnerabilities you talk about with pretty much any other IoT attached relay. It's like, you can turn things on and off, and they don't have that much security. Oh no. The other one they looked at has a PIC32 in it. I kind of expected it would be embedded Linux, but this is kind of neat that it's a microcontroller with Ethernet. You know, I got this with the intention of using it in my rack, but we could also just use this as like a streaming research device, potentially. It's kind of an interesting device, maybe. Default credentials, sure. Yeah, and like SNMP with its plain text passwords. SSL. Self-signed certificate. The business logic behind the power cycle mechanism, yes. I think they're being a little naive about how this stuff is usually implemented when they think about this as having business logic. Oh, wow. There's a session token leak. Oh. You know, that's... This reminds me of the managed switch I have here, which also I think is like a microcontroller with Ethernet. And so they have this system that only supports a single session at once. And it's like the kind of thing that you would normally manage with SNMP, but this was probably too cheap for SNMP, so they wanted to kind of only sell you the web interface and make you buy a more expensive one if you want SNMP. So, yeah, I ended up writing this Node.js thing to scrape it, and then realized that it only has a single session that it supports. So as soon as my scraper connects to it, it boots me off of the regular web interface and vice versa. Yeah, this isn't as bad as I was kind of expecting. It's like, yeah, weak SSL cross-site scripting. The session leak thing seems like the most worrying thing to me, maybe, but... Anyway, that's interesting. Let's see what else we got in this hardware. So this is like a separate module that seems to have all the smarts. So I would expect on this cable we would find like maybe analog or digital measurement information, like on-off for the outlets, power, as well as Ethernet. Oh no, the Ethernet's on the front. Ethernet and serial come out directly in front. So this would only be power stuff on this cable. Oh, interesting. There's a teardown Steven found of an 8-channel switched version of something similar to this. Well, that's cool. Yeah, no, this is great though. It looks like we've got current transformers on line, neutral, and ground. Is that true? That's pretty great if that's really what's going on. Okay, so power comes in here. It looks like we've got just little clip-on ferrite beads over here for a little bit of RF suppression. Ground goes directly to the chassis. That's interesting. The ground for all of these outlets go through the chassis. So we're grounding to the chassis and then grounding the outlets to the chassis. That little chunk of chassis is part of the ground circuit. Oh yeah, good question. The chip right above the micro, that looked like flash memory, but that looks like a firmware revision. 8021 M/R, it looks like 3.5.7. Looks like there's a different version of this that maybe puts Ethernet on that side. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. There's a spot for a button and an Ethernet jack on this edge. Like maybe there's a different chassis style that works that way. We should see what the stacking interface is like too, right? And there's this connector. You think that's JTAG maybe? Yeah, so what's the best way to take this out? It looks like it's just these 3 screws here. Are these going all the way through? Looks like it. Yeah, so those are long screws with lock washers. They also have little marks, like marker marks on them, like maybe to make it obvious if they've been turned, or maybe just to indicate they've been checked. There's also a 4 right there and another A. There's an A on the other side of the chassis too. Oh yeah, the battery mount is interesting. That battery is not directly on top of the other components. It has 2 through-hole pins, and it's just kind of spaced off the board. All right, so these are these rivets? Or are these attached? I think these are pressed into the sheet metal, and then there's like a plastic like bushing around them. Yeah. Yeah, I think those are pressed in. That's nice. Cool. Can we get this board out too, and then just look at it all out of the case? This is my heavy-duty HS110. Oh! Oh, weird. So this board might be for 3-phase, and they're only using a third of it. I just noticed that these are labeled phase A, phase B, phase C, and then the phase B and C are just unpopulated. That's interesting. Do I have 2 current transformers in here that are just free for the taking? Could I just take these and not affect the functionality of the module? These 2. Oh yeah. GevMage on YouTube chat says that they made a metered PDU with metering on each of the ports back in the day. That's cool. Yeah, I was kind of, I mean, I should have paid more attention. I thought that this model was metered on each of the ports, so I'm slightly disappointed, but that's fine. It's still pretty useful. And yeah, so I was expecting it to have a little bit more stuff in here than it does, but this is still pretty nice. So I've got an insulator there, and then this is just stiff wiring. I think I want to cut the zip ties and then just take the quick connects out so that we can get a closer look at this. Let's see if this makes sense. So this is actually a jumper from phase B to what? This is all actually kind of weird. I don't know if I want to take this apart before we look at it. So yeah, there's a little closer view of the phase B, phase C, phase A. Yeah, so they're using phase B, which is especially odd to me, maybe. These are current transformers, lots of turns, and then just a single wire in the middle, looks like. And this is kind of a separate section of the board. Like, I don't know if there's actually any tracks going between these two. Okay, let's take the hot incoming off of this. Oof. Who named these quick disconnects anyway? Ah, the wiring is so stiff. Yeah, I don't know. Reconsidering taking that off again. Let's at least move this out of the way so we can see what's going on here. That's a diode. Assume this is a switching power supply with rectifier, input storage capacitors. Switching element is somewhere, maybe on the back. Where's the left side switching? Yeah, we really should just get this out. So the thing I was looking at over here that really surprised me, it's got this thing where the hot wire and this other hot wire share one quick disconnect. I've just never seen that before. Like, I've never seen that before. And I assume that's just so that the hot can go through, and then maybe the neutral is switched, which is also a little weird. Where is the switching, though? Maybe this one is not switched. Maybe it's just metered. Still, why is the neutral broken there? It's not. The neutral is bonded just via the circuit board. this is not switched. It has a single metering channel. It actually has 3, but they're only using 1. This is so weird. This is a strange device. And so these 2 neutrals, they're bonded on the circuit board. I don't know why they didn't do that with the hots. And then all the rest of this just seems to be switching power supply for the circuitry locally here. I don't think that's a slot so that you can snap them apart, because they are actually passing the current monitoring signals back to the same connector, but they do look like largely separate designs. I would like to just be able to show you the back of this. This wiring is so stiff. So yeah, big solder blobs for the inputs and outputs of the current transformer, but then the sense coils just run down the middle and go straight into that connector. So the sense coils all share a common, and then they have their own separate signals. So there are 4 sense coil wires, and those seem to be on what would normally be the top side of the connector. That's pin 1 through pin 4. And then pins 5 and 6 in the middle seem to be ground. Or power, but what is that actually? Yeah, that's actually positive. Yeah. That's positive something. Oh, that's the output side of the switcher. That makes sense. Yeah, so the switcher controller is this chip. There's the opto-isolator. So that's the secondary. I thought that these diodes and capacitors at first were the input, but these are like catch diodes for the secondary side of the switcher, and these are the output capacitors, which I would have noticed right away if I'd bothered reading their voltage rating. Where is the voltage rating? 35 volts at 330 microfarads. It's got this other big choke over here. Is that for power factor? Anyway, that's the input storage capacitor. 400 volts, 47 microfarad. Yeah, this is the isolation boundary between, so like it doesn't have just a single high voltage, low voltage boundary, right? Because this stuff over here is kind of a mix of high voltage and low voltage, where they've got high voltage going through the current transformers and then low voltage across the middle of this board. And then this section from like right there through right there is low voltage, and then from right there to right there is high voltage again. And yeah, this thing looks a little bit like a current transformer also, but I think that's just a choke, like a big coil. I think that's used for either power factor correction or just like input filtering, but yeah, it's something on the input side. So let's see what the measurements go into on this board. So pin 1 is here on the left. Looks like these unstack pretty easily. That connector definitely comes out easily. Oh yeah, good question. Craig is asking about the sense resistors, which are, when you use a current transformer, usually you want to take the current that comes out of the transformer and turn that into a voltage, which is easier to measure. That's not necessarily the only way to do it, but it's pretty common. So yeah, are they on this board or the other board? I think the sense resistors are right next to the current transformers on this other circuit board. I think they are these surface mount resistors on the top here. It says 16R9. That's not like 1.6 mega ohms, is it? Maybe that's not the sense resistor then. Oh yeah, those are connected across the coils. Yeah, I think those are the sense resistors. And then let's see if we can figure out where that goes once it reaches this board. Oh, interesting. We've got some exposed test points right there that you can kind of see through this slot. That's cute. Can we just unstack these? So there's 2 stacking connectors. From the now I understand why it was cheap on eBay department. Yeah, no, this thing is made really well. It just doesn't have quite the features that I was hoping for. This is a Maxim serial line driver, I think, Max 32321. So serial port right there, and then that's the Ethernet. That's the Ethernet transformer. PD95557. Is this an LED driver, maybe? There's another one of the same chip over here. There's a little Linear Tech chip nestled in there. I don't know what that might be. AD7417. I wonder if that's the A to D converter. I'm trying to follow where those pins go. So it's the left 4 here. They go to these test points too. Seems like that also goes to this chip HC4051. That's not an analog switch, is it? I should start looking these up. That is an analog switch. Okay. So they're probably just using separate analog switch and A to D chips. And then let's look that up. So yeah, here's the analog switch. Pretty common part, I think. And then 87417. Four one-channel ADCs, or I mean, it's one ADC with a mux. Yeah, we're on the 7417, so this has a built-in multiplexer. They might have just needed more channels, because they probably want to sense voltage and current on each phase, so 6 channels at least. Yeah, that's a good guess. Craig is guessing that maybe this was something that was originally designed for 3-phase, but they had extra stock, and so they kind of repurposed it as a single-phase board. Yeah, that's certainly possible. And what is this chip? Lots of test points. All right, so this one is just analog and display, basically. Oh, this is like the same kind of rubber bumper you'd buy at the hardware store. It's funny. A lot of flux residue on this board, too. Is that a date? October 9? ICT 7? I don't know. We never looked up this other chip, did we? PD95557. Yes, it's I2C IO expander. So I'm looking at this chip here and this chip here, which seem to be the same. I think it's this. Oh, interesting. The same board was in the switched version. Did they have a separate relay board then? This would almost be a good starting point for some kind of slightly more custom power measurement project. Because it's not exactly what I want, but it has a lot of good parts in it. So yeah, this seems to be display, and like I wonder if the connection between these boards is basically power and I2C and maybe SPI. MAC address. So this is the Atmel microcontroller, which has built-in Ethernet. This is flash memory. It's interesting that they would have separate flash memory. I wonder if they need that for like the web page and stuff like that. Okay, separate relay board that connects to the extra connector on the display. Oh, gotcha. The one on the left that is basically the same format as the one on the right. That's cool. So relays over there, monitoring over there. So while that's going to be going through the I/O expander. Oh, is that a serial EEPROM over there? Yeah, 24LC 1281. What is that? 1201 maybe? That's probably settings. This is probably settings, and that's probably firmware. I don't know if there's any flash memory built into here. I might have to look at that Atmel part again. Five, 6, 7, 5, 3. Do we not have a data sheet? I keep forgetting that Atmel bought Microchip, or Microchip bought Atmel. Oh, and their website takes so long to load now. Oh my gosh, I just want a search bar. I don't see this on the Microchip website. Like, there's an Octopart link that doesn't actually have any details, and then it shows up in pages that are about this particular APC power distribution unit. This might have been a customized part for APC. I wonder if there's other stuff in the same kind of model number space. Like, was there a 750 maybe? No. Not much coming up here. Like, one route to figure out what kind of chip this might be is to look at what Atmel was offering around when this might have been designed that had built-in Ethernet, and just see if there's something with around the same, like, pinout and package and stuff. Would this have been an AVR? I just can't even with this microchip AVR thing. I don't know where to find information about old Atmel products post the microchip acquisition. I don't know whether this is going to be an 8-bit or 32-bit processor. It seems like they could have gone either way. But, like, I am not going to find information about the old stuff on this website, probably. I wonder when this is from. Like, have we established when this might have been designed yet? I don't see an obvious date code. That PCB marking might indicate 2008. This has something that looks like 0804 over here. I don't know whether that's 2008 or 2004. When did this model come out? Who would have the release date for this? Oh my gosh, this thing, buying this, I can buy one of these brand new for $470, which is way more than I would pay for this on eBay or would consider paying for it. Yeah, when would the release date of this thing have been? Man, here's another one of these going for a lot of money. That's interesting. Oh, maybe the copyright date on the manual? 'Cause, I mean, I thought I would have seen something like that on the bottom here, but... Like, there are various numbers here that I could try to interpret as years, but they're all 2-digit, right? Maybe 2008? Although, I mean, it seems like this design is way older than 2008. So, let's find the manual. The manual doesn't have a revision history, does it? This is what 1U is. Thank you. This is useful though, we should have this handy. Okay, this is dated 2003. And this is probably a date for this revision of the manual, which doesn't seem like it would have been the first revision. Could we find maybe like a 2002 vintage Atmel catalog? Yeah, Craig says power monitoring hardware is stupid expensive. Yeah, I mean, that's why I was kind of happy to find something cheap on eBay, as usual. I'm usually happy to find things cheap on eBay. It's just usually there's a reason it's cheap, and then I sometimes discover that reason after buying the thing. But if it's cheap enough, sometimes I don't care, right? 2008 edition. Oh, here's the 2002 Atmel product guide. What would they have been selling in an adjacent product space at this point? So they had 8-bit micros, RFID stuff, FPGAs, space parts, power PCs. It actually is kind of handy just to have this list of all the different model numbering schemes they would have used, because maybe we can just find something similar. This was, yeah, AT5. That really seems like it would have been... Well, I don't know. Because they tend to use like AT and then the next number to indicate a series, it looks like. So what would AT5 be? Or AT56? I'm also just kind of enjoying browsing through what they have here. Internet appliance processors. AT86, AT76. This is AT56. I wonder if that's like an Ethernet line. Gosh, a lot of products. And Microchip bought them, still. So weird. Memories, secure microcontrollers. I'm really close to using the search feature. I know the search exists. I just also enjoy seeing what's here. A lot of 8051 stuff. Here's the AT Tinys and AT Megas. Oh, yeah, programmable logic. And then there's index. Okay, so do they have any AT5 stuff? Nothing. I guess that must have all been secret products. Well, darn, anything with Ethernet? Smart Internet Appliance Processor in a 208 lead PQFP. That might be related, right? Is this, I mean, I haven't counted the pens on this, but this looks like it could be a 208 QFP. So that was the AT75C220 and friends. Although that's the only one that actually mentions Ethernet. And it seems like a Smart Internet Appliance Processor might be applicable. So this would have been an ARM7 TDMI. The first time I encountered the ARM7 TDMI is in the Game Boy Advance, or in the Nintendo DS, really. But let's see if this is at all related to what we're seeing on the board here. Because I mean, maybe it isn't, but so it has dual Ethernet, some DSPs, JTAG, boot ROMs, all this other stuff. Buses. I don't know what this Oak DSP thing is. Oh, Voice over IP. Weird. I wonder if the chip we have here is like this, but without the DSP functionality. Dimensions. Oh yeah, how big is this? I guess we could just measure the size of the chip also, which is slightly faster than counting the pins. 27.2 millimeters, 27.3 millimeters square. Seems plausible. That was D1 I was just measuring. Sure. Yeah, like, so this obviously isn't the exact chip we have, but it seems like it might be related, like from a similar time period, probably using a lot of the same internal building blocks. So what does this have in terms of memory architecture? We have 88K of integrated RAM. We have a boot ROM, but external firmware probably. Which explains the external flash. So if we were to find downloadable firmware images for this, we could probably expect it to be like a flat binary that goes into an ARM7 processor. Probably without much of an OS, but maybe a small RTOS-like thing. Hey Tuco, how was your nap? Can we get the cat cam going? Hey chirpy boy. Oh, you discovered my cup of coffee. Oh yeah, so Station 240 mentions, they were basically suggesting exactly the conclusion that I just came to. They were wondering if the AT5XXX is like a custom version of the AT7XXX devices, like how the 54XX was a mil-spec version of the 74 series. Yeah, it certainly could be. I was just not aware of this particular Atmel series, but it does seem like it's similar to like the AT75 or something like that. Hey Tuco. Well, what should we do with this? Should we put it back together and test it out, maybe? I'm going to put it back together regardless. I mean, we don't have to do that on stream, but I'm going to do it, I think. And so might as well keep doing the stream. Oh, the camera's just going to be following Tuco around. That's cool. So, yeah, I don't know, because like, when I thought this was a fully switched PDU, when I was having those particular visions, it did seem like it would be really nice to have all the computers in the rack on their own separate power metering and switching, and that this would be more effective for that than maybe having a pile of HS110s inside a Faraday cage. But given that I only have one metering channel, it's useful, especially given that actually the UPS I'm using in the rack does not seem to have great metering built in, because I was just complaining about that earlier. It seems like, even though it's telling me the load percentage on the front of the unit with its LCD, that it also just doesn't seem to know how to report that over USB, despite the fact that my other APC UPS seems to be fine with that. It just doesn't have that in the firmware for some reason. Oh, cool, we got some firmware. You think it's encrypted? We could take a look at that too. Maybe I'll put some screws back in here, and if anybody feels like taking a look at that file, they can report back. Otherwise, maybe I'll take a look at it in a sec. Oh, this cat is so good. So yeah, I don't know if we're going to get to the Tuco Flyer debugging on the stream since it's already a little late, but the state that it's in right now, I can kind of move it slowly and it's kind of smooth, but then it has this bug where the winches will just start and stop unintentionally. I've got a pretty good idea of why the bug is happening, but I don't 100% know, so we're going to have to dig into that. I think it's a bad interaction between the hysteresis feature that we added on the last Tuco Flyer stream and one of the built-in, not built-in, but like one of the firmware safety features that prevents the motor from running if it thinks that the motor is stuck. I think that the definition of stuckness does not properly take into account the new hysteresis filter, so that might need some work. Anyway, I think let's just put this back together. Let's put the insulation back in. These quick disconnects are really stuck on there, so I'm just gonna leave them and make sure that they're on there really well, but not try to take them off. This wiring is just really rigid. It's all solid and thick gauge. Like the APC service, if I sent this in for service, they would know I've been all over this because all the screws are going to have their little Sharpie marks in the wrong locations. Tuco's getting a good view out the window. Can we keep tabs on that? There we go. Oh look, hard ride and walk on. Yeah, oh man, Tuco has been such a jerk with some of this lab reorganization. Because naturally, I mean, maybe not naturally, but like the way Tuco is, he loves chomping on wires. Various kinds, but his favorite things to chomp on are thick, heavy-duty extension cords, HDMI cables, and coax. Like, that's what he really likes. So it's been kind of a chore keeping all that stuff away from Tuco as I've been working on stuff here. Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks, Craig. Craig said this has been super fun and they haven't thought about current monitoring so much in like 8 years. Yeah, I feel like it's an interesting thing to do occasionally. I got interest. Oh, Tuco wants to get into this gold port package. I kind of want to get into that too, but I don't know if we have time for that on this stream. Oh, is he chomping on, oh gosh. He wants to chomp on this multi-outlet cord. He's already been just chewing the crap out of this cord, jeez. Even, yeah. I cut off the part that was chewed the worst, but now he's been... And now you're knocking stuff off? That's cool. Thanks, Toot. Hey, Tuco. This is what I get for not cleaning my desk. Tuco just wants to do it for me. Funny. Don't be destroying every single thing here. Like, if you want to destroy a cable, bite this one, because you've already been destroying it. Oh. There are a lot more screws in this circuit board than in pretty much any other part of this device. Gosh, yeah, I think I just need to trash that entire cable, because Tuco just wants nothing more than just to chomp on it. And I don't know if it's good for his teeth, but I don't know. If he wants to chew on something and it's not bad for him, I could just give it to him as a toy. But like, chewing on power cables just doesn't really seem great, even when they're not energized. Oh yeah, but I was saying about power management, or power monitoring. I really got into this whole house energy monitoring system years and years ago. This was, I guess, the first time I lived in like a place that was bigger than one room, basically. And so it was kind of nice to do some just like kind of homey sort of stuff there, although a lot of the homey sort of making a nice place sort of living space improvement stuff I did was like kind of weird because it was like really like tied up with this relationship that wasn't great at the time. Anyway, some of the things that I did that I liked, you know, involved like making a nice office space and having having this like energy monitoring setup that I liked. And so the energy monitor thing was this thing called the Energy Detective, or TED, unrelated to the talk series. I think I will actually put some new zip ties on here. So yeah, there's this thing called TED, the Energy Detective, which was a whole house energy monitoring thing with current transformers, much like these, but they were the clamp-on type, and little clamp-on meters that you would install in your breaker panel, and then they would report back over a power line modem. So there was a little reporting device that you would also install in your breaker panel that would do all the A to D conversion, and it would send back digital data that was encoded in this 1200 baud serial stream over, like, you know, maybe one of the circuits in your breaker back to this box that you could just plug into any of the outlets and receive that signal. So naturally, I thought it would be cool to make my own receiver for that system. I tried, man, these wires are so stiff. I know I've said that a bunch, but it's like, why am I even zip tying some of these? They're not going anywhere. I guess a couple of these make sense to zip tie. Station 240 says I need to print a new batch of bolts for Tuco. Oh, Tuco has plenty of bolts, but the bolts don't satisfy the chewing urges. He doesn't chew the bolts. I could try making squishy bolts. I wonder if he'd be into that. Oh, now he's back to the chewing. Oh, he's got his favorite thing there. You can see the slobber on the cord. Are you done with this already, now that I put the camera on you? Look at all those fresh bite marks. Those are all fresh. Oh gosh. Oh, is he gonna... He's acting like he wants to hang out on top of the rack, which is actually a great spot for him. He likes it up there, and I've tried to make it nice for him. Oh yeah, cable ties are great. I've been kind of into the reusable Velcro ones lately, but I still appreciate a good old-fashioned zip tie. Oh, that's cool. James reports that the firmware does not seem to be encrypted and might have some interesting plain texty stuff in it. That seems cool. Yeah, let's definitely look at that if we have time for it. Hey, Tuke. Every time I think I understand what he wants, he just does something different. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to do that will definitely void, well, I don't know about definitely, but probably void the warranty, is I was going to cut off this plug and put on something that I actually have an outlet for. Because I know locking plugs are great, and I know I can get an adapter, but I kind of just want to have the right kind of plug for the situation I'm in, so I might just cut this off and put this in my spares. And then I've got a couple of PDUs here where I've shortened the cables too, because I just don't want a ton of extra AC cable in my rack. So sometimes I'll want a PDU with like a 3-foot cable instead of an 18-foot cable. Alright, I think let's just put these back together. See what it looks like over the external Ethernet interface. Oh yeah, and so also, like, whereas like the Kilowatt and the HS110 even can get away with no isolation, and you could even pretty much get away without the isolation if this was only Ethernet, because the Ethernet has its isolation transformers. This has a serial port, and the serial port definitely needs isolation. So they're definitely stuck with an isolated power supply in this design, which is interesting. It's like maybe more useful for other stuff. That also maybe means the current transformers are a more natural choice than shunts, because the shunts are not isolated, whereas current transformers are always isolated. So yeah, just to reiterate again, like this big chip seems to be an Atmel of the same family as the AT75, etc. Probably without the DSP, although maybe they had a use for a DSP here if they were doing a bunch of like waveform integration. But it's probably a version without the DSP and with integrated 10100 Ethernet. It also seems like it has RAM but not flash, hence the external flash and external EEPROM over there for settings, presumably. Oh, that's really cute. I think they have a little notch in the sheet metal here just for this particular thing that I'm doing. How thoughtful. Right, and then that plugs back into the one place it has reached to. So as we were saying, that's where apparently the relay board goes on the models that have a relay board. That's cool. It might actually be nice. I mean, it'd be nicer to have separate monitoring for each of the outlets, so it would actually be kind of interesting to at least figure out how to divide the outlets into zones so that I can maybe have 3 zones of current monitoring here with these 3 transformers. That would be an interesting hack if we could figure out how to modify the firmware, or even just put on... Would it be useful to have a 3-phase version of the firmware? I don't know if that would be extremely useful, but that might be a starting point at least. Okay, I think that's all together. Oh, right, there was a zip tie right here. I think I'm going to leave that off. I'll probably be back in here, so I'm not super worried about extremely vibration proofing this thing. Okay, and these take these pretty stubby sheet metal screws here. Oh, that's cool. Craig says, yeah, the current sense transformers are nice that way in that they're automatically floating or isolating, and that their monitor used the analog inputs on an Arduino to read the burden resistors, with them floating around a 2.5, like, half VCC point. Yeah, that's pretty handy. So you didn't need to use any external preamplification. You could just feed that right into the A to D. That's pretty cool. I would have expected that you might need an op-amp there. But it does depend on the value of the burden resistors. It also depends on the bandwidth of the measurements you're trying to take, because if you don't need measurements very quickly, you can give the A to D a lot more settling time and give it more time to charge up the sample and hold capacitor, and kind of trade off between the stability of your voltage or current reference and the amount of time it takes to sample. And that 2.5 volt reference trick is also kind of handy. If you haven't heard of that before, it's a way to avoid some of the uncertainty that comes from operating right at the edge of the limits for, really any analog circuitry, but in this case, what an A to D converter can handle. If you've used op-amps, you might have heard this called a common mode range, which means the range of voltages where the op-amp behaves in its usual way, the common mode. And it's to say that the op-amp will work outside that range, but it might not behave according to its specifications. So it won't have the same amplification gain that it would, or it might not be as linear as it would, which is usually what happens. And so A to D converters have that same problem where if you get really too close to its edges, it can behave unusually. So it's kind of common to put 0 somewhere that isn't quite at ground, or to use a separate reference for that. That's why you see differential inputs on A to D converters a lot. Because like then you have two inputs that are referenced to each other, and the ground, it's important to have a stable ground still, but it's not as important to the measurement necessarily. This sticker, or this screw, is under the sticker, so it's got all this white stuff on it. I might as well put the ears on just so I don't lose any of this stuff. It's nice that the ears have a bunch of different locations they can go in. I'm just going to put them on in kind of a straightforward way. Actually, it looks like the cable organizer wants to go on before the ears. These use the really stubby screws. That's Tuco doing his usual litter box routine where he has to destroy a nearby plastic object. Yeah, I'm still actually not 100% sure what Tuco is looking for, like right after he does his business. I presume he wants to clean off his paws, so I've given him like different objects to see what he likes. I figured he might like a carpet square, or when it seemed like he wanted harder objects, I tried giving him a piece of plywood. But it seems like he wants something kind of in between. Like, he seems to like the plastic side of the trash can that's near the litter box, and so he'll just scrape on that. There used to be a shelf next to the litter box that he would scrape the side of. Oh, hey, Tuco. You gonna step on everything now? I love you, tiger. What a cat. Oh, you're just gonna sit right there. That's cool. Are you gonna continue to chomp on that Bullport package? It's the problem, like everything that I'm not currently protecting from Tuco, he could be chomping on. Oh, there are so many screw holes for these ears. It is really delightful. Lots of potential ear locations. Ah, yes, yes. One of those cat ear headbands, except for the rack mounting ears. I like that. Yeah, Tuco was pretty into the 3D printed bolts for a while, it seemed, but I think these days he's most into the nylon bolts, and he's got a pretty good stash of those. I try to make sure that he has a little bin of bolts that he knows where it is. Lately it's been hanging out next to his water bowl. Or he's got like a little fountain for water because he likes running water. Why is the cat so overexposed? Cleaning mode. Gotta make sure to have enough cat footage for the next video, right? I end up going through so much cat B-roll. Yeah, the cat ear hairbands are pretty cool. I'm amused that the counterweight system for the Tuco Flyer leash ended up looking like a cat ear hairband. Do I have a better view of that from here? It's approximately as bad as the view was from the other side of the shop, although Maybe now that I can move the DSLR around a bit more, we can get a better view of that on the next stream. I'm so glad that the streaming stuff is working again. There's just so much yak shaving involved in getting that working. Okay, so that's back together. I'm gonna cut this cord somewhere. Maybe right here. There's already a gap in my cat proofing apparently, and this is actually a good length. Because this is more cord than I need to get from one side of the rack to the other. And it also leaves a decent amount if I want to use this locking plug for anything. And this is still a decent cord. So let's just do that. Oh gosh, this is thick. Wow, that is a lot of copper. Alright, and this will go back with my cords, and I'm going to grab a rewirable plug. Did the robot follow me over here, but then not find the cat? Oh, Craig hasn't heard the term yak shaving. I forget where that comes from. I think it's actually a reference to some cartoon I haven't even seen, like SpongeBob or Earl and Toe Jam or something. Or that was a video game. I don't know. But it's a I don't know, it's like a term for the stack of kind of extra jobs that you have to do in order to do the thing that you're actually trying to do. It's basically about technology. Yak shaving and technology are basically equivalent. Yeah, I guess it's sort of like bricklaying. I think it has a bit more of an implication of like being on a bit of a nested wild goose chase. Like it's this thing that kind of builds up into like a larger thing necessarily than the thing that you were originally trying to do. Oh man, how do I want to strip this? I think I want to score it with a knife. This cable is so big, I actually don't know if it'll fit into the strain relief on the plugs I have. Oh. Oh yeah, yak shaving could be rapidly expanding side quests. That's another good way to describe it. Oh man, I also rewired this so that I have this auxiliary SDI output for my camera. So I don't currently have a separate viewfinder other than the stream, but I've got a space to plug one in now. So I need to, I think the cheapest way to do that, because they sell, you can buy like these nice little SDI monitors that would be perfect for that, but they're really overpriced. My strategy is usually to get like an automotive entertainment system grade HDMI LCD and then stick an SDI converter on that, so I might do something like that. Gosh, okay, this cable was really not meant to be damaged, which is nice. It'll give Tuco a challenge, maybe, if he ends up getting to it, although I'm trying to keep him away from it anyway. I'm just making somewhat substantial kind of slices into the cable around the perimeter, but in a way that does not hopefully touch the actual inner insulation at all. Let's see if that worked. Gosh, I want to test the low power control electronics in here, and I'm doing wiring on giant hunks of copper. So that looks safe. Oh wait, no, I take that back. I nicked the ground insulation very slightly. Let's try it again. Same idea, but slightly less deep, I think. I'm trying to score it with pretty shallow cuts. I mean, I have to use some pressure and go in because this is just really sturdy rubber, but I don't want it to go very deep. I just want it to start a cut that I can then pull apart. Let's see if that worked. I don't know if that was deep enough. Okay, Station 240 says that according to Google, yak shaving is programming lingo for the seemingly endless series of small tasks that have to be completed before the next step in a project can move forward, which does seem accurate. I guess it feels to me like it's applicable to way more things than programming, but I guess that's where the joke mostly lands. Okay, I think I managed to get in there without damaging the internal wires. I'm sure there's a tool that just does this perfectly. Like I have a crimper for Ethernet that has like a round piece and then like a razor blade that just goes across the round piece, so you can close it on an Ethernet cable most of the way and then just rotate the cable a little. I suspect one of those would be handy for this, but I don't have one of the right size. Yeah, I'm just surprised that the AC, like, I think this cord is beefier than the cord on my UPS. Oh gosh, Tuco, what are you chewing? That is a USB cable. Honey, he's been at that one before. It's a micro USB. Yeah, because I've got a pretty beefy APC UPS in this rack, which it's 2200 VA. It has like a 20 amp breaker and two 15 amp breakers on the outputs, and the cord was not this beefy. It might have also been shorter. I don't know. Oh, this is close. I've still got that same song stuck in my head. I really don't want to tell you what it is, because then you'll all have it stuck in your head too. I don't know where it would have heard it either. It's like kind of an old song. It was in some movies I like, but nothing I've seen recently. Oh wow, UPS batteries with holes melted in them? How does that happen? Do they just discharge at high currents? Okay, no, that wasn't it. Although that one's pretty bad too. Tuco, honey, what are you chewing on? Don't lick Raspberry Pis, don't chew USB cables, definitely don't chew power cables. I should put that Raspberry Pi away before he licks it to death. Okay, I think I've got this actually stripped safely now. And then I've got these rewirable right angle plugs, which are pretty cool. this is actually what I want for a PDU, because this is probably going in a rack where it's not going to be plugging into something at a right angle, but if I end up using this outside the rack, these are actually kind of handy. Tuco is in cleaning mode and biting mode. And I think I need a slightly different Phillips head. Okay, Matea says it's from Ren and Stimpy. Yes, so that's a cartoon that I don't know much about, but that's where yak shaving comes from. I'm just like looking at what Tuco's doing. It's like, is he biting a cable or his own toenails? Seems like his own toenails. Rewirable plugs are just so nice sometimes. I mean, the bad ones are terrible, but a nicely made rewirable plug is just very nice, I think. It's pleasurable to use. This one even has a guide for how long to strip the wire. Right there on the back. Yeah, I'd be curious to know how APC's strategies for maintaining the UPS battery compared to other UPS brands, if that's even a worthwhile generalization to make. So I think I just have to get these all into the little windows. And give them a slight twist to keep the strands together. Oh man, if I tell you what song it is, some of you are going to be like, oh, that song's fine. And some of you will be like, no, why? Okay, I'm going to tighten these slightly and then try to torque them all properly. This is when you don't have a torque wrench, and so you just say click when it gets to the right spot. Click. Click. Alright. You can actually put this cord together in various orientations too, which is kind of handy. It is possible this wire is not too big. That's relief. It's also interesting, I've seen these screws on, I think, nothing else other than these rewirable plugs. It's this kind where the threads are extremely coarse, so you turn it by maybe only half a turn or one turn and it moves in like 10 millimeters. Like, I assume it's something about the kind of clamping forces they have to get in soft plastic that makes that useful, but I've seen that in a couple of different brands of rewirable plugs, but nothing else really. I don't know if the strain relief is going to fit. This wire is really dense. Oh, maybe it will. Yeah, every time I think this plug might not be up to the job, it proves me wrong. It does the job. Thanks, plug. I should sell sponsored Scanlime plugs. This will be my my latest swag item. All right, it's ready for a test. Oh, did we figure out how to reset this to factory settings? I assume it's something like hold down the button when you turn it on, but it might be more complicated. Oh, and it fits with the Tuco protector. Pop fizzle goes the breaker. Yeah, I hope not. I mean, if the breaker goes pop, then you'll hear a bunch of beeping and the stream should continue. Okay, let's first just power this thing on and see if it works. I'm a little nervous about Tuco sitting right there, but this is in a metal box. Okay, so I'm plugging this into a power strip that is currently turned off. Hey, Tuc. And let's turn it on now. Got some lights. We have a warning light. I wonder if that means it's booting, or if it's not configured, or if something else is wrong. What does it do when I repower it? Because it looked like the lights changed. So I power it on. This light starts out yellow and stays yellow. These flash and then stop. It might just be warning me that it isn't configured or can't get an IP address. So I'm going to assume that it's probably okay, and that we just need to figure out... Oh, now it's trying to do some networky kind of blinking. And Tuco is back to chewing on that power cord. Hey, Tuco, do you just really like chewing? Look at that. Honey. Oh, trip the breaker to the entire house. See, that's like maybe a regional difference. They're usually, I mean, depending on where I've lived, some places have like whole house breakers and some places don't. Gosh, Tuco, do you just like chewing the crap out of this? I don't know whether to let him keep chewing it or not. Like, it seems like this is probably relatively safe, but... And he's just looking for other stuff to chew as soon as I take this away from him. Okay, let's see what this manual says. Manual. Honey, it makes me so nervous when he's just looking for things to chew. Honey, not that. If you're gonna chew something on my desk, at least chew that. Oh, gosh. Tuco is such a handful sometimes. it's got some good instructions here. Loop the cord around, make sure you can unplug the cords without removing the wire ties. Yeah. Ears. Serial port. Is there a way to reset it without the serial console, or do I need a serial console? We might need the serial console unless this thing is already configured such that I can access it. It would be interesting to do some serial console poking around on this thing. I just don't know if that's a good thing to do tonight. Maybe we can save that for tomorrow. Oh yeah, fuse. You mean a fuse in your electrical meter or a fuse in a multimeter? I've definitely blown multimeter fuses and had to replace them. That sucks. Yeah, I mean, I could just plug this into the internal network and then visit the DHCP server and see if it's assigned anything new. I just don't really want to mess with that on stream. I don't usually do network configuration from this machine. Yeah, this might be a good place to wrap it up for now. And I think things we can do on future streams are for sure, like the Tuco Flyer debugging, obviously, and just poking around on this thing, possibly downloading the firmware and looking at the firmware. For sure, let's make a serial cable and talk to it. That seems useful. So yeah, so I think we need a serial terminal, or we need to be lucky enough to have access already, which we might be. I mean, the seller might have set this to the default password, but it seems like it'd be useful to have serial anyway. Oh, it looks like that light turned green now, and it says 0 amps. So actually, there might have been a startup procedure I just had to wait for. Press and hold to invert the display. 1P. AA. Oh, this physically mirrors it, so in case you install this upside down. That's handy. We could try just measuring some power with this. Like, still got that heat gun. Maybe put it on low first. Five amps. 8 amps. Yeah. That seems happy. And this status blinking might mean that it doesn't have a network connection. But yeah, this seems fine. Alright, well, yeah, I don't want to mess with my DHCP stuff right now, and accessing the serial port would require more setup than I want to do at this time of the evening, so I think I'm going to call it a stream. Thanks so much for joining, and we will pick up on stuff related to one of these random little side projects or one of our usual projects like Tuco Flyer on the next stream, which might even be tomorrow. I'm going to try to do them more often now that I've actually got my infrastructure set up again, but I should also try to clean up the mess too. So yeah, no, I mean, there's a bunch of things I can do to detect this on the network without knowing the configuration already. I just don't want to do that from my streaming demo machine necessarily. So I'll work on that before the next stream, and or do that off stream or something. So, oh, is there an IP address display on here? That might be worth just trying really quick. Hold down the button until it says IP. Oh, cool. Yeah, well, let's just do something really quick where I plug this into the switch. I'll be right back. I need a patch cable. Tuco got bored. I'm at least close to the network switch here, close to a network switch. Yeah, it'd be kind of nice actually just to have a second network adapter on this demo machine, and then the demo computer can just run a DHCP server directly on that, which might make it easier to just plug in unknown network devices on stream. Because I just try to keep my like internal management infrastructure and my streaming demo stuff a little bit separate, you know. So I wouldn't want to do network administration from the demo machine. Okay, let's do a little test here, and then I will actually leave for reals. Plugged in. Oh yeah, that could be good. I mean, if it had a hard-coded IP address, that'd be fine too. I would just need to plug it into a different network. But yeah, let's see if it tries DHCP just when I plug this in. I'm expecting to have to reboot it, but doesn't seem like anything changed. I can't actually see the link light or lack of from here. I'm just going to power cycle it. Oh yeah, that's a great question, Craig. Craig is asking if the streams are regular or if they're announced ahead of time. Right now, unfortunately, the answer to both of those questions is mostly not, although I'm trying to get back on a regular schedule where I do them like at particular days of the week. It's just right now I've just been trying to kind of do things as I have the space and stuff to do and everything else, and all the logistics is often more complicated than I wish it would be. But yeah, I'm trying to get back to a regular schedule of either doing these like 2 or 3 days a week or sometimes daily. But in the meantime, what I've got is an announcement system so that if you just happen to be around when I'm streaming, you can tune in pretty easily. And so that's available if you follow the Scanlime Live Twitter account, or if you follow my regular account on Twitter or on Mastodon. I do announcements there. But yeah, I'm trying to get back on a more regular schedule. It's just so far that hasn't really materialized, and I've been trying to work at it, but it's not actually happening yet. The schedule I was doing for a while, which I might try to do again, was basically like all-day streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then rest of the time mostly infrastructure and editing. But I might be able to stream more of my video editing on this current setup, so I might be able to do that more often. Yeah, how is this? It still seems to be doing the same blinking. Let's see if this does anything when I hold the button. Zeros. Do we have a link light? I can't see the switch from here. I'm not getting a network link. I'm going to try a different cable, just in case the cable's bad. No change. Ha! Maybe this is why it was cheap on eBay. That just doesn't seem to respond. Oh wait, well, weird. I saw the link light flicker very briefly. But I've seen it do that without the cable connected also. Yeah, so the device at the other end of this is, I think, a Netgear switch. What kind? Yeah, it's a Netgear JGS516, if that matters, but it's a gigabit switch. Yeah, I mean, there are various things that it could be. It could be a configuration issue. It could just be the Ethernet port is busted. There are a lot of things we could try, but I think this is a good time to end the stream. But yeah, we could definitely debug that. I'll have to write a note that this might have busted Ethernet, and we should look into that. Because that would be useful to know if the Ethernet is actually good. But it's got a good plug on it, at least, and it seems like the current monitoring works. And Tuco is just going to chew as much of this as I let him. Alright. Well, thanks again, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. A special thanks to folks who send in hardware and donate on Patreon to keep the lights on here. And I'll try to do my part and just stream all the interesting content I can. Do let me know what things that you like the most so that I can figure out what to focus on, because the biggest problem I have here often is just knowing what to spend the most time on and what to do less of. So appreciate hearing back from folks. Thanks for stopping by, folks. I'll see you next time. Until then, happy hacking. Is Tuco gonna climb the rack again? See you next time.